We've now gone live online.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hello. Here I am.
Oh. Just waiting for a couple more. Give it another minute. I saw Councillor Davis's name up there earlier, but maybe he's logging back in.
He sure had a good connection last meeting we had. He was sitting on this porch, came in loud and clear.
Yeah.
Can you turn it sideways?
Oh, there we have.
There,
Okay, it looks like everyone's here. If anyone could just put the members of council put the cameras on to ensure attendance. Hello, Councillor Davis. Councillor Woodward.
Good afternoon.
All right, looks like everyone's here, so it's my pleasure to bring the regular meeting of Township of Langley Council to order. And the first item is I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and especially to recognize the relationship that we have with the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Musqueam First Nations. This time, I move to the regular council meeting agenda. A few notes. It's I know we've some interesting things happening. We do have a 4:30 hard stop because we have a presentation that we have to go to in close. So when we get to that point, we will then have just have the motion to go into close. Maybe we're done this meeting by then, I don't know. And also there are some items on this agenda. And if council has any questions regarding those items, we can certainly move into close to deal with those questions at that time. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adopt and receive the agenda items.
So moved.
Councillor Long, and second by Councillor Kunst. Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I had a question with regards to items number E7, N5, and P3. And I'm wondering if we might just table those items in order to deal with reports on other agendas first.
Okay, so just trying. I'll ask the clerk, but I think we can deal with them, and perhaps when it comes up to those items, we'll see where our timeline is.
A point of order, whatever you want to call it, you were point of information. Didn't you just say that? Didn't you just say that when we come with items that we need, then we can move?
We can deal with this. I'm just going to ask the clerk, Ms. Bauer.
We could make a formal motion as Councillor Richter is speaking of, or as you know, there's many things on the agenda, and we do have the 4:30 stop. We may not reach those items before anyway. But if we reach the items and council would like to resolve into a closed meeting, we can do it as we reach those items. It's up to council's discretion.
Is that the game plan then, that we will resolve into closed when we reach those items?
Yeah,
we can, or at that time that item can be tabled and then brought back after the conclusion of the closed meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. I think Councillor there, thank you. All right, at this point, it's my pleasure to welcome our new superintendent, newly promoted Superintendent Adrian Marsden, the new officer in charge of the Township of Langley and combined with the City of Langley detachment. And we want to welcome you here. I know you've come in from your posting in Edmonton, but you're not unfamiliar with our region, having served in the Metro Vancouver area for many, many years, and I think born and raised in this part of the world. So I want to turn it over to you to Superintendent Marsden and welcome you here. If you want to provide just a few introductory words and meet the council.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship and councillors. So yeah, my sixth shift here in Langley, just arrived 6 days ago, and just to say a few things about myself. Firstly, I'm super excited to be here. A little bit about myself is I actually grew up in Victoria. So after finishing high school there, I went to UVic and then got a degree at UBC, and threw caution to the wind a bit in joining the RCMP. Wasn't really sure how that would go, but it had a great time. I was initially posted to the Lower Mainland. I did postings in Burnaby for 10 years, North Vancouver, and then a number of sort of plainclothes units in Surrey before I went over to Vancouver Island for a couple of years and got the opportunity to run the Duncan detachment, which was good, I think, in making the transition over to Langley, and that they had a sort of a district and a city set up as well. And then from there, I was commissioned to the officer ranks to Edmonton and ran the serious crime branch for 2 years. So we essentially supported most of the detachments in northern Alberta in relation to homicides and kind of the more serious offenses. And then over the last 3 years, I worked in criminal operations in Edmonton, overseeing a couple of other units. So got to see kind of the big machine working. So got lots of good experience there. So about all I can say is, I'm just ultra excited to get to come back. I'm not going to miss the minus 40 degree temperatures in January and February. Not that it wasn't fun, but 5 years was good enough for me. And I was just so happy to be here. Just such a beautiful place to live, and just super anxious to get started. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and so happy to be here. So I just wanted to say that. And then lastly is with me here today actually is my operations officer, Inspector Steve Wade. And I was just wondering if he could just have a few minutes to introduce himself as well. Lastly, again, just thanks a ton. I'm just so appreciative of this opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you. Inspector Wade.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, it works. Hello, I'm Inspector Steve Wade. I've met some of you over the years. I've been back here in Langley now for about a year. This is my second tour in Langley. I was here from 03 to 08, the sergeant, staff sergeant. I'm an 18-year resident of Langley up in Walnut Grove. This August will be 36 years completed in the RCMP. I was really excited to be able to come back to Langley here. I might have run in with you, some of you at Fort Langley Remembrance Day. I'm part of the organizing committee there, and I've been the parade commander there for about the last 8 years as well. I'm involved in Scouts in Langley and a number of other activities. Like Superintendent Marsden said, I'm the operations officer here. I'm in charge of the day-to-day operational policing of all the uniformed members here in Langley. Look forward to having a good year. Now we don't have to wear, or once we don't have to start wearing face masks anymore.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Inspector Wade. And I know with COVID and everything that's going on, we didn't get the opportunity to meet you sooner, but I'm glad we get to meet you now officially. And it's interesting, Inspector Wade, and my career started off about the same time. I think you were a month before me joining the RSP, and we had a chat about our friends that we know from the past.
Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. And Superintendent Marsden, I know you're not going to see minus 40. At least we don't think so, because we never thought we'd see plus 40. So welcome to sunny British Columbia. I've got a few members of council like to have a few words. So I'll start with Councillor Long.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to be the first to welcome you, OIC Marsden, and welcome back, Inspector Wade. I guess you've been here all along, but now you're in a different capacity. Anyways, it's terrific to have you attend the meeting, and we wish you the very best. And anything that council can do to make your jobs easier and our community safer. I'm sure I can speak for all my colleagues that we're there for you. I was going to ask, maybe Your Worship, you know me, I'm a bit cheeky. There is a notice of motion at the end of the meeting that asks about offices, and I didn't know if you were going to hang around and can make comment on that. But I guess we'll be discussing that at the very end of the meeting. But it would be, yeah, you can see it for yourself on the agenda that there was a question asked about recruiting officers and filling vacancies and so forth. But anyway, that's there for you. But again, welcome to the Township of Langley, and we look forward to serving together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, so welcome to our community. Superintendent Marsden, really pleased to have you come here. I do know Edmonton, lived there a bit myself, so I have that experience of the cold winters myself. And welcome back as well, Inspector Wade, back to Langley, at least in a working capacity. I did have a question. I know this is not an interview by any means, but I just was interested, Superintendent Marsden, just Langley and coming back to Langley, and what just sort of you think is exciting about Langley from an RCMP perspective, and you coming here, and what is it about Langley and coming to the township that really is exciting for you?
Well, I think for me, as a police chief, you kind of want things. You want a town that's big enough to be exciting, and then not so small that nothing happens. And I think Langley is a developing community. I think I talked about this a bit when I was interviewed, actually, about the kind of urbanization of Langley. I think with the housing prices we have, I think that the population density is going to increase in the coming years. And I think that, there's going to be, challenges with that. I think already seeing it a bit with, the homelessness that we have here. And then with that, you tend to get like an increase in property crimes and things like that. But I like it's very similar to North Van in size and also the community spirit. So to being able to tackle problems together and with community support, I think is fun. Be honest with you, I've worked in other places where it wasn't so much like that, where the council didn't actually love the police so much, where I think it's very frustrating. But I don't think I'll have that here. I think so. It's not going to be boring. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be. I see a lot of hope, and I think that I can. I think I'll be able to achieve all the challenges that are going to face me. Frankly. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you. Well, I appreciate your answer, and certainly we'll get into more things as time goes on. But I appreciate both of you coming today and being part of Langley, and welcome here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councilor Ferguson. Oh, you're muted. Your headset's interfering again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll be the fourth or fifth to welcome you, OIC and Marsden. Certainly, can you hear me now? Langley is a wonderful place to work. I mean, but it's also very interesting because we have the city of Langley and the township of Langley with kind of a joint force. So it's always a challenge, and the number whenever we get officers in. I know the city hasn't added anybody for a while, and that's up their prerogative. All I ask for, and I think other members of council as well, is to keep the lines of communication open and as plausible as possible. I certainly don't know, and I don't think the other members of council will want to know about the investigations or the acts of crime. I want to be able to sleep at night, but certainly the communications open between ourselves and maybe more frequent visits, either to our in-camera or to our regular meetings. So certainly you and your team working together with us, that's the most important thing. As you know, Surrey has had challenges now. They're leaving, I guess RCMP is leaving, and also leaves us with the opportunity to work with RCMP, as we've always had a good working relationship. So certainly welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much. And just to speak to that, I always feel that I kind of have multiple bosses, to be honest. I kind of work for my RCMP bosses, but I also feel that I work for the people in the detachment. Then I also feel that I work for you. So I always like to know that I'm keeping my bosses happy, frankly. So me communicating to you is not going to be a problem at all. I always want to kind of know that I'm doing what you want. So that is, I'm 100% online with you there.
And Steve, I've run into you, certainly Constable Wade, I've certainly ran into you many times over the years. So good to see you back in the action.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Oh, thank you very much. Welcome. I'm never really the fourth or fifth or sixth one to welcome a policeman. Years ago, I used to meet them all from time to time. My dad used to have a habit of having long conversations on the side of the road and how wide he could really load a load of hay. But anyhow, welcome to, it sounds like welcome back to Langley, Inspector Wade and Superintendent Martin. And one thing Jack already mentioned, you don't like -40, but here we sit in +40. And I know that crime never takes crime is an opportunist thing, and it never takes a break, doesn't matter what weather it is. I just want to mention that I do enjoy, I find it very beneficial when the superintendent comes and talks to council as a body. It doesn't have to be for very long, just, a half an hour just to keep us posted a couple times a year. And I find that I get a real pulse on what's happening better than, most, because we have you. So I really enjoy visits to the council table to keep us posted on what's going on. And thank you very much, and welcome back to Lower Mainland.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you. I just want to personally say welcome back to you both. And it's delightful to have you on board. I think I'd like to echo the comments in the sense that Councillor Davis is talking about our interpersonal relationship. So I, in particular, am looking forward to sit down once the health protocols allow that to happen, so that we can have a less formal meeting and chat about different things, as well as hearing regular reports about what's going on. I totally agree with the changing demographics and the development of the community, that a lot is changing that we have to pay attention to, but I think we're in very good hands, and I look forward to working with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd like to echo the congratulations and welcome comments to your new role as superintendent. And I had a request that I'd like to put in. I am quite concerned, as are a number of different community members, with regards to the targeted shootings that have been occurring over the past little while and affecting our community. And in the past, the RCMP have provided a very extensive briefing to council with regards to gang activities. And I was wondering if a similar briefing could be implemented with regards to the recent targeted shootings and gang activities that are occurring right now. So there is precedent, and I hope that you will be able to follow that precedent. And again, congratulations and welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I think I'll take that back.
Thank you very much.
Back.
I sort of expected that question, so I'm certainly good to go. I would expect that I'll probably be meeting with you in a month or two, or in the near future. So I'm ready to go for a meeting with you. So
Excellent. Thank you.
I hope it won't take 2 months.
no, yeah.
Oh, I know when we had an impromptu meeting, myself and Superintendent Marsden, and that came up too. I said it was near and dear to council's heart with what's happening now. So he's aware of it. So thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, I just want to echo my councillor colleagues' comments, and just to say welcome to our community, and it's great to meet you. And it's a really hot day, but we usually get really awesome weather. So anyway, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at exhaust the list from councillors, I want to welcome you. So again, welcome. I look forward to working with you over the next several years, and wish you all the best. And no tie policy. I don't know if it's still in the RCP. You have a certain day where the tie can come off. Is that still there? And
I think they've loosened up on that, actually.
What's that?
I think they've loosened up on that now.
Yeah, good, because it used to be a certain day and it
Yeah.
didn't matter what the weather was. You had to wait till that day.
Yeah.
So good thing they loosened up. All right. Well, you take care, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll move on to adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 14th and the public hearing meeting of June 14th. Could I have a motion, please?
So move, Ferguson.
Council Ferguson moves. Council Arneson seconds. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Now we now move on to delegations. There are 3 delegations, and I look back. I made an error. I should have added the C3 to the agenda. So we had a late delegation. So I'm going to just ask for a quick motion to add C3 to the agenda. It's Mr. Mike.
Move C3,
Kelly.
Ferguson.
Council Ferguson, seconder. Council Long. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Great. Thanks. So there are 3 delegations, and we're going to start with Mr. Mazai, Jerry Mazai.
Councilors, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jerry Mason. I'm a director of Cornerstone Training Station. One of the
Okay, just gonna slow down a little bit. I can hardly hear you. I don't know if your mic or if you can get closer to it. Might be just what you're on. And just a reminder, you have 5 minutes. So there you are.
well, just started speaking fast.
Speak louder.
But my name is Jerry Mason. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. If you look at it, speak up.
I'm
Thanks.
director of Cornerstone Training Stables, one of the owners of the properties in question with respect to these motions. I've been asked by the owners in this Con West group, we'll call them that, to speak to the council process committee recommended motions of June 21st, 2021 regarding Con West OCP and rezoning application. The motions are K3, K4, K5 in council agenda. I will refer to the owners in the Con West group throughout my remarks as the owners. The owners are here to support the Con West position in opposition to motion K3. All of the owners are in attendance except for Brian and Marilyn Woodley, who pass on their regrets because they have a medical appointment and cannot attend. In addition, Paul Hildebrand, our group's legal counsel, is in attendance. Each of the owners has read this presentation and agrees with the contents thereof. The original 8 owners of the 8 properties started the process for land exclusion about 15 years ago. The township passed a resolution to support the exclusion about 2009. Since 2009, we have proceeded on the basis that the township of that township resolution. It was always the view of the original owners that not only would this be good for the original 8 owners, but would also be good for the township. Given the predictions for growth in the Fraser Valley, we felt our lands, which are not suitable for any kind of farming, and given their proximity to the industrial park, would give the township much needed industrial land and an opportunity to substantially increase its tax base. The original 8 owners went to the Supreme Court at least 3 or 4 times over the years in regard to the application process. March 2020, the Agricultural Land Commission approved the exclusion on a conditional basis. The original 8 owners received 2 proposals, one from Mr. Martini and one from Con West. All but one of the original owners met to consider the offers and approved the Con West offer as it was substantially better. Mr. Martini entered into a confidential purchase agreement with the owner who had not attended a conditional purchase agreement with the owner who had not attended the meeting of owners. Mr. Martini was then successful in getting Mr. McCall to break away from the rest of the owners and eventually drop the confidential purchase agreement with the other owner. Mr. McCall had personal reasons that made him quite desperate to close this deal as soon as possible. These personal reasons were known to everyone, including Mr. Martini, as I had discussed them with him when we first met. Con West presently has firm and binding deals with 5 of the property owners in our group and a development agreement with Mr. Panu's company, as Mr. Panu does not want to sell and wishes to remain as part of the development. Once Mr. Martini tied up the McCall
Excuse me. I just would prefer you speak to your application and not to neighboring property owners. I think that's maybe unfair.
Pardon me, sorry?
If you could just speak to your application or the application that's on council, you're starting to bring in other property owners, and I don't know if that's appropriate because they're not here to rebut it, and I think that'd be inappropriate for council. Thanks.
We all should do this right here. I'm not certain what the problem is.
Ask if he's talking about Mr. Panu.
I don't know what the problem is here. Are you talking about Mr. Panu?
No, Mr. Martini. I just, there's another property owner that's not involved in this particular application.
I'm trying to give you the history of what happened here.
Okay.
Okay? So once Mr. Martini titled the McCall property, and I know all these facts, he approached myself, Lorraine Blackall, and Mr. Panu to try and get us to break with Con West. In the case of myself and Ms. Blackall, Mr. Martini offered to buy our property for approximately $1 million less an acre than his original.
Point of order,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
Yeah,
my point of order, maybe I might ask the clerk, is Mr. Martini's name on the application before council currently?
I'll ask those questions. Thank you. So
If not, you should not be mentioning his name whatsoever.
Council Ferguson. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I will remind you again, maybe speak to your history, but to bring in other neighbors, property owners, I don't think is appropriate because this isn't a court. We'd just like to hear what your reasons are for yours to go forward, if that's what you're here for. But the history, who said what and who did what, we can't cross-examine. So I think it's inappropriate. So I'm just asking you to stick to your application.
Just go to ELC consideration.
Thank you.
Okay. So in any event, I can talk about what's happened with the Agricultural Land Commission application. The Agricultural Land application has only been necessary because one of the property owners refuses to sign the covenant that's required by the Agricultural Land Commission. The question is, why would anyone refuse to sign that covenant? Without having gone into being allowed to go into the details I was prepared to tell you about, I'm not sure that you can figure out why that's the case, but it is the case. That's the only reason. The only reason that we're having an application before the Land Commission at all is because one of the property owners will not try to fulfill the conditions as set out by the Agricultural Land Commission. We've offered we've tried to get that person to cooperate and sign the necessary covenants. There's been a refusal to do that. And thus we have to make this application for reconsideration to try to exclude these 6 lots. That's all of these facts are in the Agricultural Land Commission reconsideration file, and we're happy to allow you to make a request to the Land Commission to review those files and all the material we've put in the commission. Our material is all supported by sworn testimony to the Land Commission. There's no other sworn testimony to the Land Commission. So,
thank you. Let's wrap up.
Yeah. What more can I say? We're here because one of these parties will not cooperate and remove this land. We've been trying to get this land out for 15 years. These people are all seniors that own the land. They're being blocked from removing the land in the ALC by one of the parties. And we would like to have this matter dealt with. If you would consider moving this up the agenda, we'd be pleased if you would do that. We're all gathered here today. Delay will not only hurt Con West, but it will also hurt these parties that are all, these owners that are all senior citizens.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And it was with respect that I asked you that because there are certain parameters that we have to deal with here. So I appreciate your comments, and I do have a question, Council Woodward. Council Woodward.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to change my mind. I'm not going to engage in this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Councilor Richter, you had your hand up. You're okay?
Actually, I did have a question, and I'm not sure that the delegation or the delegate can answer it, but I'm still very puzzled as to why, when these 8 properties have been treated as a contiguous collection of 8 properties, and the ALC has ruled in support of the 8 properties being removed as the 8 properties to deal with drainage issues, fencing, and other matters, why would we support breaking off 5 of them? I'm not quite following that logic.
The application to the Agricultural Land Commission over many years was to exclude these 8 properties. They did that. They wanted a continuous barrier along the north side to separate these properties that would be out of the ALR from the properties to the north that would be in the ALR. One of the conditions was the covenant. I don't believe the Land Commission ever considered, after 15 years of trying, that somebody wouldn't agree to meet the conditions of the Agricultural Land Commission. It was only because someone has intervened and stopped that process that this has occurred. Otherwise,
but is there not an application in front of the ALC to reconsider their decision?
there's an application in front of the Agricultural Land Commission to allow these 6 properties to come out by fulfilling the conditions, and the other 2 properties to come out when they fulfill the conditions. And it's not like there hasn't been an attempt to get everyone on side here, because there has been a number of attempts to get everyone on side. We haven't been able to do it.
Okay, well, I'm quite content waiting for the ALC reconsideration. I think that makes the most sense from my perspective, but thank you for your delegation.
Well, thank you. There are no further questions, so thank you for your delegation. We'll move on to Mr. Today. Mr. Ben Today. Thank you.
The sound check, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Ben Today, and I'm the COO and partner at Con West. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, and staff, for the opportunity to speak to you about these 3 motions in the agenda, labeled K3, 4, and 5. Please know that Con West is committed to working with the township, our neighbor, and all other stakeholders towards a mutually agreeable outcome for this project. Con West is agreeable to working with the township on a negotiated benefit package as part of this development in advance of first and second readings of associated bylaws. Con West is also agreeable to working with the township on a new approach regarding community benefit contribution for future commercial and industrial lands. And finally, Con West respectfully asks that motion 1 be defeated as is not necessary, will cause significant delay and hardship to our company, and that council allow all required land use approval processes to run concurrently with the ALR reconsideration process. I have 8 brief points I'd like to make for your consideration. First point is Con West is a local private developer and site servicing company with a long and rich history in the township of Langley. Founded over 35 years ago, Con West housed its head office in Port Kells until 2005. Con West remains one of the largest industrial property owners in Port Kells. Personally, I've got 3 decades of developing residential communities in Langley. Con West is also proud to have been selected as by the township to develop its lands adjacent to the new museum in Fort Langley. Our approach to business is founded on old-fashioned values like community-mindedness, neighborliness, fairness, and transparency. We also look to leave all stakeholders in a better position at the end of projects than they were when we started. My second point is that the land acquisition process for this project was competitive. Con West was chosen as the preferred buyer by the majority of the owners in April of 2020. Con West is the agent and developer for 6 contiguous properties. Company 1123522 is the owner of 2 contiguous properties. My third point is Con West has a significant interest in the lands. We have 5 firm, unconditional, subject-free contracts of purchase and sale in place. We have secured our interest in these lands on title. The properties will be transferred to Con West in the future. Con West has a co-development agreement with 1 owner. Con West has posted significant non-refundable deposits with vendors as consideration, and Con West is paying industrial market value for lands based on township's existing bylaws and policies and its early endorsement to remove the lands from the LR. My fourth point is that Con West is happy to work with all neighbors and all stakeholders in this project. Point 5, Con West is committed to being the lead developer for the catchment and to resolving the common development issues for all 8 lots in the catchment. This is a common and legal approach for large-scale land development projects. We have a proven experience and track record. We're committed to completing the OCP and neighborhood plan amendments, the metro boundary alignment, the rezoning to M2, the offsite servicing, the habitat compensation approvals, the stormwater management plan. Other neighbors are more than welcome to join or not in these applications. We welcome that. Point number 6, we support council's motion to have staff commence work on the commercial industrial community benefit contribution method, which is motion 3. We understand the importance of this option as a source of funding. We have extensive experience with this process, and we'd be pleased to lend our expertise in this matter if requested. We ask, however, that our project not be delayed by the creation of said method. Point 7, West is committed to working with staff towards providing a negotiated, fair, and reasonable community benefit as part of this project, which is motion 2. We also propose that this amenity package be included in a revised application to be considered by council in the coming weeks. My 8th and final point, which is motion 1, which is the deferral of first and second to the ALC reconsideration process complete, is not fair, not necessary, and irrelevant at this stage. As we respectfully request, they be defeated and that the township and all other land use approval processes be allowed to run concurrently. Firstly, final approval of land use policies are at the discretion of the township and will be conditional upon the removal of land from the LR regardless of the reconsideration outcome. The metro approval process must run subsequent to third reading of township bylaws, and we have confirmed that they will do that without the land removed from the ALC. Did that this morning. The ALC reconsideration case request may take many months or quarters to complete. Motion 1 will cause unnecessary delays to the project, negatively affecting everybody, including the township and its citizens, by delaying increased property taxes, jobs, fees, DCCs, etc. All other, the only covenant not to be registered on title in favor of the ALC is for 26713 56th Avenue. All other covenants in favor of the ALC have been duly registered. If the neighbor does not sign the covenant, all of his property rights will be protected by the township through the typical development process. Also, we are happy to take on those obligations and cost at our cost, as the conditions, if you get into the ALC, really come down to the covenant not being signed as the only material outlying requirement. Thank you very much for your consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I do have some questions from council. We'll start with Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. I hope you can hear me all right. Yeah, I want to thank for delegating. I mean, I appreciate that, you know, very often we can make decisions on occasion or debate it at a committee meeting. And of course, it has to come back here, allowing for an opportunity to delegate. I just want to confirm that I didn't receive any information that I think I'd already had when we debated at the committee meeting. I think a lot of this was communicated ahead of time and in writing, but it's certainly interesting to see it represented with a room full of people. I did have a question though, because you, I think, and rightly said, very experienced developer. So I did struggle, and I did discuss it with one of your other employees briefly. I did struggle with the rationale of purchasing farmland, rural land, that is outside of the urban boundary, outside of the Gloucester neighborhood plan, and paying and buying that with the expectation that it would be rezoned. Can you maybe walk me through a bit through that? Because a lot of your rationale seems to be around a hardship situation, which seems to me to be entirely avoidable by not buying rural land with the expectation of a rezoning. So can I get some more on that, please?
Hi, Joe Carr, VP Development, Con West. Yeah, just to start on that response, Councillor Woodward, you know, the purchase is a function of a number of things. One, a very competitive market. You don't compete in these ways, you don't tend to purchase it. And this was also a competitive process. So that's part of it. And then buildings, much needed employment lands don't get developed, right? Or basically developed by others. So this is the world we live in. This is part of it. Of course, we did all the due diligence we could do, including obviously discussions with ALR, Metro, and township staff. Council themselves in 2010 endorsed the application to the ALR for the removal of these lands. That is a report that was supported by a Stantec study. So the strength of these, that kind of information, plus the fact that, you know, when we did write our offers, the lands came with a resolution from the ALC that support or that actually excludes the lands from the ALR, conditionally, of course. That's what we're all talking about. But the lands, just to not lose sight of the point that the lands are approved by the Executive Committee of the Agricultural Land Commission to be removed from the ALR. And quite frankly, in conversations with the ALC, there is, that decision's been made. They wanted to move forward as well, because that decision's been made. How do we move forward? Meet the conditions. We're prepared to meet all those conditions.
Okay, I might maybe let some of my other colleagues, but I'll have one more. I mean, I did ask a bit about this referral in 2010, and I did get some information on that. So I appreciate you raising that. Of course, there's been 3 elections since 2010. Do you have any comment on that? That maybe positions and policies and the economies and local government experience changes over the pace of 11 years?
Well, I don't have a first. The Township's current OCP is encourages. So we had conversations with senior staff, and part of those conversations were around the objectives of the Township's official community plan, which includes job creation, employment, land development. I'm happy to dig those up and send them to Mayor and Council for reference.
If I may add, Councillor, when we did our due diligence, as Mr. Carrera alluded to at the beginning of the question, we did a thorough review of Township's policies and bylaws. There is no industrial CAC on this property. And I think where you're going with your question is that, yes, the world has changed a lot over that timeline. And there are other jurisdictions, municipalities in particular, where bylaws and policies have changed. But when we purchase property and we do our due diligence, we take a look at the policies and laws of the day and make a decision. And that's what we do.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll have another follow-up on that, because I think that's the crux of the situation, that if someone were to buy farmland next to Willoughby and pay townhouse rates, are we obligated to rezone it to townhouses for them?
Yeah, I don't think the question is, with all due respect, one of your obligation to do anything. What we're trying to convey is just our process and the fact that we rely on facts, and to our knowledge, those facts have not changed. We understand that the township is considering making some bylaw and policy changes, which would take time and would have to go through the process.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And of course, I think as an experienced developer, which is kind of interesting, you position yourself as that very clearly. An experienced developer purchased land outside of the urban boundary, and the process is that it has to be approved by Township Council. So again, it still surprises me that you would make non-refundable deposits on property like that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the collective delegation. I did have a question actually having to do with this process. So it's been referenced that there is some concurrency that's being requested. So I would just like to explore and have you articulate what your understanding is of going through this process and the degree to which there is precedence already and potentially in other communities to have these applications be processed along a similar timeline. Is that something that you could explain?
Sure, maybe I'll start. You can chime in. Okay. So as Joe told you, the ALC has ruled conditionally that these properties can come out of the ALR. There are not many conditions. 3 of the conditions have to do with the covenant and buffer between our properties and the property to the north. Particularly, we have to provide a buffer. I think it's about 8 meters wide. It needs to be contiguous. It does not say that it necessarily has to be contiguous along the northern boundary. It could dogleg down. So that is an option, which will provide our neighbor the opportunity to move forward at his discretion. The other requirement is that there's a fence constructed as part of that. And the third one is that we could bond for that work in advance. The last one, which is the material one, is that the Township of Langley must approve a stormwater management plan that ensures that there are no deleterious effects to the properties to the north upon development of the land. Development defined as construction of the building, etc. So that's where we start. And Mr. Matsai, mentioned that up until recently it was the one group. There was the intention for all properties to come out once. So we find ourselves in a reconsideration position because we can't register the one covenant. That reconsideration process, which is governed by the ALC, will take however long it takes. The properties could come out tomorrow, not tomorrow, exaggerating, but literally very, very soon, if that one covenant is registered. If it's not registered, we have to go through the reconsideration process. It could take as little as probably 60 to 90 days for the council to decide that they would even entertain the reconsideration. If they do, they'll go to the next step, which will either be a hearing. I'm not sure if it's in public, but it could be in camera. And then there's a decision. Once that decision comes down, it could be appealed. So there is no visibility on the timing of that ALC reconsideration. It could take a few months, it could take a couple of years. All other processes, be they township processes, metro processes, provincial processes, are not contingent on the ALC decision of reconsideration. They're not contingent. So why are we waiting? Because at the end of the day, the properties will come out one way or another. And we are very happy to work with the neighbor and all stakeholders to that end. So that's the big picture. Joe, I'm sure, has more detail he can provide as it relates to examples and recent conversations with Metro.
Yeah, all I would add there, not to drag everybody through the details. However, what's important is for us, right, which is why we're here, is to keep things moving, right? And item K3 on the agenda basically doesn't allow us to do that. Ultimately, of course, it's up to its council's wishes whether they approve this rezoning application. That's a decision for another day. The decision today is just allowing ConWest and the owners group to keep moving with our application. The Agricultural Land Commission has confirmed that there's a lot of precedent, there's a lot of examples of properties across the province that get rezoned or go through a rezoning process whilst still in the ALR. That was confirmed. We again, just to put a fine point on it, we're not asking that we have our final zoning approval before we're out of the LR. That no, we understand. We expect that our zoning application would be held up at final reading, subject to ALR exclusion and subject to Metro. So we're good with that. We just want to keep moving here. Get back to that in a second. The other process is the Metro Vancouver process. Typically, yes, they like to see properties out of the ALR before they will consider the municipality's application to Metro. Metro has confirmed there is examples and precedent, and they are looking at this because the world's getting more complicated. Things are being approved conditionally, etc. So they've confirmed that they will review our application. It's not our application; it's actually a township's. After public hearing, they will review it, and again, they will hold up their approval of it, and i.e., they would make the Metro approval would be conditional on ALR exclusion. I mean, Councillor Woodward's quite right. There's a lot of risk here. Yes, that's the world we live in, unfortunately. But which is part of the reason we're here, asking that we can continue to move this process forward, our application forward, to start to address some of the risks. Which is actually, I guess, the last point is the timeliness for us is important because we are in a position now with all the work we've done thus far and the work that we will continue to do to address a lot or most of the development issues here, including environmental issues on site. But there's a time for all the lots, the whole catchment, but there is a timeliness to that as well.
If we could move on, perhaps. We have a huge agenda. Keep that just a little shorter. And the question is a little shorter. I'll go move on to Councillor Richter. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Anderson? Councillor
Yes,
Richter.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I find the statement that was just made, the property will come out one way or the other, a bit puzzling, because I was under the impression that council has unfettered discretion in rezoning decisions. Unfettered decision in rezoning decisions. However, that's not my question. That's a comment. My question is, we've been going through a transitionary period as a result of COVID. We're hopefully well on the way now to moving away from the COVID protocols. But my question is, does ConWest plan and commit to holding a public information meeting and a public hearing on this application? Because from the point of view of one of the decision makers on a rezoning, I want to get public input on this.
If I can ask a clarifying question, Councillor, public information meeting on which component? Are you talking about the township land use changes for the ALC, or?
Yeah, it's a rezoning. You're taking rural land and making it industrial land. So the public information hearing or public information meeting is a term that we've been using. Essentially, it was the old open houses that developers used to have for rezoning applications coming before council.
Yeah, okay, I can answer that. Maybe I can clarify my statement. When I said the land is coming on the ALR1 with, what I meant was the ALR. I'm not talking about any township land use approval processes. Yes, you're very right. Unfettered discretion over that. I was referring to the ALC conditional exclusion.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah,
now, what about a public open house as well as a public hearing? Is it your plan and your commitment to do those?
It's our plan and our commitment. We do that as a regular part of our process in dealing with our applications, and we would look to the guidance of the township to work with us on defining what our processes. But yes, we will commit to both of those.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much for coming out. You know, a lot has been said. One question that Joe had said, I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't get your last name, but Joe had said that there's Jerry, I'm sorry. There's been lots of examples in BC where it has come out of the ALR. No, it had, maybe you might have to clarify me. We had rezoned it before it had come out of the ALR. And I don't know if I agree with that totally. So maybe, Joe, could you just maybe elaborate briefly on that? What you actually clarified that for me, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Davis. I just, in all our research through the ALC, we've discovered and learned that there are precedents in the province where a municipal process will occur, and some municipalities will rezone a site, notwithstanding that it's in the ALR. Nobody's asking for final adoption. We're not asking for final adoption of the rezoning. We're just asking for permission to move forward to the next steps.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And one other qualification, clarify for Mr. Tetel. You had said that it's not fair to wait for the ALC. Just clarify that briefly. I think everybody waits And I know this company or all you folks have been waiting for quite some time. Just because you're waiting doesn't make it fair. But I know it's not fair that you're waiting. But what do you mean by not fair? Just spell that out a little bit. I think you may have, but just so it would resonate with me, please.
Okay, so as we mentioned, the land is conditionally approved to be removed from the ALR. That's the starting position. And there's nothing, as far as we know, preventing the township from deciding to move forward with all of the background work that we typically have to do as a developer working with a catchment in advance of first and second reading or most notably public hearing. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. There's also no requirement to do that. There's also no requirement as it relates to the metro boundary realignment to do that. So, and thirdly, because we are open and willing to work out all development issues as it relates to all 8 properties in the catchment, which is both legal, right, and typical in the development community. There is no, in our opinion, hardship created to anybody by doing that. And we're not asking for any financial contribution to allow us to do that. So why would we do that is the question. Why delay that typical process? That's the question. And our opinion is it would be unfair to do that. The other material consideration, Councillor, is that nobody knows how long that reconsideration process will take. Paul Hildebrand, the owner's lawyer, is present, and he can provide detail on what that process could look like, and he could speak to the details of the ALC reconsideration process if anybody does have any questions. But it's our opinion that it just is a material delay. It could be 2-year delay. Why delay it?
So I guess in a nutshell, ALR are delaying it, and in your eyes, we're delaying it. So it's like,
in my eyes, that potentially, with all due respect, council could delay it, and it is your prerogative to do what you deem fit. Our intent here today is just to make sure before you consider that decision that you have the facts as they are, not the facts as we see them. And the facts as they are is what we're trying to convey. And what Mr. Jerry Asai also said was that all of these facts are in the reconsideration request signed by affidavits, supported by affidavits sworn by the owners, that the owners are willing to make available to you. So you have all this material. And we would just hope that we know, we work with council for a long time, you would seriously consider these facts.
thank you very much.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you for coming today and presenting. It's really been helpful to get some clarity on the subject. I don't have a lot of questions because they've been answered, but I just want final clarification so I understand. What you're asking is to continue to do your work to meet township requirements as well as metro requirements at the same time that the ALC is considering this exclusion. And you're asking for reconsideration on 6 properties rather than the 8, which was originally agreed to by the ALC. If the ALC decides in their reconsideration decides not to either reconsider it or to stick with the 8, then any decision by Metro and Township in some ways is moot anyways, because it all is contingent on the decision of ALC. Is that your correct understanding?
Yes.
Okay, good answer, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Well, I had 2 questions. Councillor Whitmarsh answered one of them. So, I mean, mine has always been, and Mr. Today, you and your team, you've had a good working relationship, you yourself particularly with the Township of Langley. I don't want to mention the myriad of projects that you've been involved with have always been quality and probably award-winning. So that goes without saying. My questions to you on the phone and otherwise is this is a challenge. This particular one is a challenge. You've admitted to it. You've had many challenges. That's why you're in this business. Now, back to my question. Now, you've got a no subjects, agreement with the owners. Is there a closing date, if I may, on something like that, Mr. Today?
Yes.
I beg your pardon?
Yes, there is a closing date.
You're not going to give it to me, right?
We are bound by confidentiality.
Okay, that's
we
fine.
We cannot discuss the details of our purchase and sale agreement, but I can confirm they are firm. There are significant non-refundables put up. We have secured it by an interest in on title, and there are no conditions.
Okay, so here comes my question. So regardless of what decision the Agricultural Land Commission makes, regardless of what decision the Township of Langley makes or Metro Vancouver, the folks behind you, the owners, they're going to get their money.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for all the good work you and your team have done over the years.
Thank you.
Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just had one more follow-up. Maybe there's a middle ground here. Right now, one of the things I'm struggling with is you're telling me, and I'm just going to take it on faith that what you're telling me, just for the sake of argument here, that the reconsideration process at the ALC is an unknown amount of time. It could be months or much longer than months. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Did you want us to reconfirm that that's what you submitted?
Correct.
Okay, so in that case, where I would hate to make decisions based on the idea that it could be a lot longer. Would it be unreasonable to potentially say, in the meantime, before granting bylaw readings, to take some time and work out that community benefit item on a pretty significant rezoning and speculation on farmland, to work that out. And then if that's all worked out and we're still sitting around waiting for the ALC, maybe look at this again in the fall under the idea that, to me, that might take some time. I don't know how we're going to grant first and second reading in a couple of weeks. That might take a bit longer. Would it be one idea to look at this again in the fall once you in fact have worked some of that out, and there is something more concrete to present, versus what it feels like right now, which is essentially trying to move that rezoning forward on a pretty substantial exclusion. And again, urban boundary adjustment, regional context statement adjustment, Metro Vancouver approval, community plan amendments, stormwater management update. That seems like a pretty long list of conditions on a rezoning to me. Wouldn't it make sense maybe just take some of those off the list prior to looking at first and second again?
Yes, great point, Councilor Woodward. We 100% agree with you. The list of typical development criteria that we would have to satisfy on this project and that we've been working towards since December of last year is significant. And it behooves everybody to agree to those, in our opinion, before first and second reading. So yes, we agree with you. And one of those conditions is to work on a community benefit, which is what we are committed to do, working with senior staff and council towards that mutual agreement. We are not here to request that this project move forward in 2 weeks. I hope that if you get that impression, that's on us.
No, that's definitely my impression. So
and that's our failure. We should not. When we're really clear here, it's going to take some time, but I don't think it should take up to a year or two to resolve as we wait for the ALC. I think it'll take a number of months, and we're very willing to and prepared to do that. So yes, we agree with you.
Okay, so I'll leave the rest for the council debate, but I just want to reiterate that I appreciate you taking the time to submit. For me, this is a pretty unique one, and I look forward to the council debate. Thanks.
Councilor Long.
Yeah, very quickly then, because I just want to clarify what I think I just heard. There are three motions, K, 3, 4, and 5, on the council agenda. You're coming as a delegation to speak to them. So, of course, I think you did say in your delegation, both delegations, that you agree with K4 and K5. K4 is to negotiate some community amendments perhaps, or whatever the, amenities. And the second is actually not that much to do with you. It's staff, council directing staff to review the whole idea of commercial and industrial CAC. So would it be accurate to say then the crux of your delegation is it's number 1 that's problematic, or K3, where this counting on the conclusion of all these negotiations with the ALC that's causing the most angst for you and the owners behind you?
Right, just to be clear, we agree with K4, we agree with K5, request that K1 not proceed, sorry, K3, request that K3 not proceed, and we be allowed to move forward as we would otherwise on any other project. Typical processes with the township, typical processes with Metro and other regulatory bodies. We not be held up from proceeding with those typical regulatory processes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any further questions from council, so thank you very much for your delegation.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to C3, and that's Mike Hele. Mr. Hele is here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Good afternoon.
Yeah, welcome here, and just for information, you have 5 minutes to present, not counting, including questions from council. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Hella. I'm with Coastland Engineering and Surveying Limited. We are the agents on file for project 11090033, which is a rezone and subdivision application to create 39 full 1-acre lots at 5759 40th Street. Here today is a delegation to provide information on 2 items that were discussed at council on June 14th during the first and second reading of the bylaw, tree retention and public information meeting. I'll start with tree retention. We spent considerable time with the project arborist and the township's green infrastructure staff on setting aside groves of trees to provide the surrounding lands with a buffering of the existing trees as the public now views this property. We have retained all trees along 56th Avenue, along the west side abutting the existing tall timber subdivision. We're also retaining a significant number of rows of existing trees along 240th Street that act as part of the ALR buffer to the ALR lands on the east side of 240th Street. I'll just talk briefly about some of the numbers of trees. The site contains a total of 6,281 trees. The proposal is to remove 4,083, retaining just under 2,200 trees, or 35% retention. Tree replacement by bylaw is to achieve 30 trees per acre. With this site, we're expected to retain and replace a total of 1,337 trees. Again, the total number of existing significant trees retained will be just under 2,200. This equates to 56 trees retained, not replacement, all retained trees per proposed lot, or an increase of 54% of the required number of trees by bylaw per proposed lot. This is a huge increase in tree retention and a clear indication that the developer has considered the neighboring properties, environment, and the township's own tree bylaw when designing the site layout and tree retention matters. Again, these are all retained trees, not replacement trees. To add to this, the developer will be planting an additional 106 boulevard street trees and 327 urban pathway cedar hedging trees, which aren't included in the 2,200 I mentioned earlier. Public information, I'll refer to it as PIM for short for time. As council is aware, PIMs were ceased due to COVID in early 2020. Council elected to restart these. As our application was on the June 14th council agenda, there was no requirement that a PIM be held. Despite this, the developer did attempt to schedule and hold a virtual PIM over the course of 2 nights during the week of June 14th. This PIM would have had phone in and email response capability and a website with boards and information for the public. When township staff was requested to send a mail out list for this PIM, Township staff responded stating there was insufficient time for the advertising and 10-day notification period. Further, Township staff stated that they would be advertising and notifying area residents on public input opportunity on a tentatively scheduled June 28th public hearing, subject to granting a first and second reading. The developer then attempted to schedule a PIM on July 8th, for which Township staff then stated there was a PIM already scheduled for the same evening, and this PIM should be held on an alternate date to maximize attendance. Due to business matters, we cannot delay a PIM beyond the week of July 8th. It's clear to us that the developers made 2 attempts to schedule and hold a PIM. Each time we've had some issues with staff due to conflicts with other files or non-compliance with the PIM policy. And this is the fact that we are trying to do this without having to do a PIM back on the week of June 14th. I'm somewhat surprised that council has decided to refer this particular application back and demand a PIM. The rezone application is the least dense rezone application that comes before council in some time. We're saving the most number of trees from a number and a percentage scenario as compared to the majority of other applications. We're proposing a land use that suits this immediate area very well, as this zone is very dominant on the south side of 56th Avenue, and we're creating less lots than the zoning bylaw permits, 39 versus 42, which we could squeeze in. Numerous applications creating projects with much higher densities and little to no tree retention have come before council the last 2 to 3 months, and not one has been referred back to hold a PIM. As a last comment for council, this property is zoned RU1, which allows for 4.2 acre lots. This will allow for 10 fee simple lots from this parcel. If we stratify, 20 lots can be achieved. Under RU1 zoning, one's permitted agricultural uses, commercial greenhouses, swine operations, equestrian centers, mushroom farms, temporary mobile homes, and temporary accommodation for farm help. This would involve removal of almost all the trees from the site in order for these type of operations to be viable. I personally feel that allowing 39 full 1 acre lots in a controlled development where over 1/3 of the trees are being retained is a far better use for this area and community than allowing this parcel to simply subdivide into 4.2 acre farm plots with stratification possibilities. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I've got questions from Councilor Richter. Councilor Richter.
Yes, it may be a far better use, but it's also a use that I think is perhaps going to significantly impact the rural character of the area. Now, you did reference that the underlying zoning right now is RU1, which allows 4.2 acre lots. So that would be 10 lots with 20 houses on it. How many trees could you save out of the 6,000, over 6,000 trees, significant trees that are already on there, if you went for 20 lots instead of 39 lots?
Well, if it's 20 lots, I would imagine the zone would not be changed, so we cannot guarantee what people want to do as the end users. They're entitled to put up mushroom farms. They're entitled to put in commercial greenhouses. If someone's going to spend money to buy let's say a 2.1 acre parcel, if it's stratified, I'm sure they'll want to try and reap some money out of it as a commercial use. There may be equestrian centers. You're asking a question I really can't answer truly.
Yeah, okay. The other question that I have is your company committed to ensuring that there is public input, meaningful public input on this application because of its impact or potential impact on the surrounding rural character of the area?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the reason why we wanted to hold a virtual PIM during the week of June 14th, was to get the feedback and show people the road standards we're proposing, the style of the houses, the number of trees being retained.
Yeah, well, 2,000 out of 6,000 is not a lot of retention, but thank you very much for your delegation. I appreciated hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ferguson.
Mr. Haley, thank you very much for coming today. Again, like the other delegation, you've got a long past history with the Township of Langley with a lot of quality development, so I want to pass that on. This is a difficult one, and council, as you know, has struggled with Salmon River uplands for a number of years, and the applications are now coming forward. And this is not going to be the first. We have, because of this, put together this request for a PIM. It might have been in hindsight, but that decision's been made for request for public information, as you've already indicated. So I guess my question to you is, if you went existing zoning, would you have to apply for stratification, or that stratification is automatic, if I may, to you?
That would be a question more for your planning staff. My understanding is the stratification can happen independent of township involvement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and thank you for coming today. I appreciate that you've come to delegate and explain certain aspects of the proposal vis-a-vis the trees and also, I guess, just the PIM and the timing of public input. I just want to put forward, it's not really a question, but it's a bit of a cautionary about the rural plan that we have that was developed in 1993, which staff at the time suggested should be more detailed. And just further to comments that came up at our last delegation, many things have changed over the last decade or so, and most particularly, the township is working on a tree protection bylaw at this time and also a canopy strategy. So I just hope that there is an awareness of the sensitivity of this particular area, which has, I agree with what you're saying. If certain things are allowable in the area, then why not consider that you bring forward an application? But I agree, this will substantially change the area. And not only that, there are others that are waiting behind this as a precedent. So I personally think it's very important that we have as much public input as possible in this process. And so I just hope that, this is something that resonates with the application, because personally, I do find it challenging that at the same time you're delegating, you're talking about what other uses we can consider when we don't have those in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Whitmarsh.
Thank you for your delegation, and I appreciate the feedback on the trees and discussing. I think you mentioned 35% retention, so I think that's that isn't necessarily highlighted in that way in the report that we got. I just had a question, and it just sparked it for me when you mentioned, if we were to have the 20 lots, the larger lot, that there would be maybe more different uses that people would want to do with their property that might impact trees in a greater way than having 39 1-acre sort of size lots. Is that what you sort of suggested, that if we were to have 1-acre lots, there would be less variability in what people could do with their lots, and therefore we might see actually greater amounts of trees saved?
Well, you're talking the basic difference between the RU1 zone and the SR1 zone. Under the RU1 zone, you're allowed up to 33% site coverage, and that could be barns, greenhouses, swinery operations, you name it. Under the SR1 zone, we are limited to a smaller density or coverage, and we are going to dictate how to actually make it even smaller by doing the controlled design guidelines. Just make sure we don't get, as I hate to say, monster houses, oversized homes that look out of character in the neighborhood. We're looking for some form of consistency on the 39 lots. So yes, with 39 lots, I suspect we'll see far greater tree retention than on RU1, where farm use is going to be allowed. You can't save trees and run a farm operation.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful clarity on that. So I appreciate that, and that's all for my questions for now. Thank you.
Councilor Kunst.
Yeah, thanks for coming and explaining all of that. I was just wondering if you have a website that is currently ready to go that people could go to. Or do you have to wait for for an official public information meeting before that launches, because I think there's a lot of people in the area that are obviously curious as to what you're going to do and want that information.
We've ceased running the website for now. We didn't want to contravene any issues with staff or council. We want to make sure we did everything the correct way, depending on how things go today and maybe possibly tonight.
Okay, but there's something sort of ready in the works should you get the proper the nod to do so. Then
that's correct.
Go to a website. Okay, thank
correct.
you.
We're willing to have an in-person meeting. We're willing to take phone calls, emails. We're willing to meet people, bring boards to them if they can't get out. It's a little touchy time with COVID still on the fringe.
Sure.
We're dealing with an area that's probably older residents, well established. Yeah, I've lived in Langley since 1978. I know the area quite well. We have to be sensitive to what people are prepared to do. But now that we're allowed to have in-person meetings, the best thing is a face-to-face and explain to people without pointing on screens. Pointing on boards is far more informative.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Long.
Yes, thank you very much. So let's just talk a bit more about that, Mr. Helly, that the report, when it came to us for first and second, there was a paragraph that said there is no PIM required. Yet we're having quite a discussion here of requiring a PIM. So that I'm wondering if you could help yourself by explaining to council how you feel about that. How that you were directed not to have one, and yet council said, "Well, you haven't got a PIM, so we're going to put you on hold here." That's the first thing, and the second was that you mentioned some dates of holding one anyway, and you just now stated that you would love to have one and like to talk to the neighborhood, and maybe you can update us. Is there any chance that the PIM will still occur? Perhaps not on July 8th because of a conflict with staff, but maybe on the 9th or the 10th. But let's go back to the first thing. I mean, you must have been surprised when that action was taken by council.
Yes, and I'll take the high road, and we just have to accept whatever council's wishes are as they vote on issues. I was a bit surprised, yes. Staff made no indication of us having to do a PIM. It's been ceased as of early 2020. No other application has been asked to do a PIM. But we thought this being a very low density project compared to many more that involve apartments and high rises and townhouse sites and high density homes, we were a bit surprised, yes.
Yeah, and just further on that, I mean, there's been discussion here. In fact, one of the councilors just said a public information hearing. It's not. It's a public information meeting or open house is something that we've injected into the process to try and help the process along. I think we're not required by legislation to have those public information. What we are required to do is have public hearings or public input opportunities when the application gets first and second. But can you assure us now that even though we've passed that hurdle and you've taken the high road, and congratulations on that, will there be a time for a PIM prior to public hearing if that was to happen tonight?
There are some certain issues that I can't discuss regarding what's real estate transactions. It's the notification period that the township is demanding of 10 days and the advertising in 2 local papers over 2 consecutive ads. And I want to touch base on that just in a second, that we just can't achieve in time. When Langley passed the policy on holding PIMs, and it's a policy, there was 2 local papers running 2 times a week in Langley. We're now down to 1 paper running 1 day a week in Langley. I asked the question if we could advertise in the Aldergrove Star or the Vancouver Summer Province. Staff didn't have an answer for that. They've never heard that before, but they're willing to look into it. But we haven't pursued that yet. But having to be tied to 1 newspaper for 1 day a week makes it difficult when we have short order things to take care of. So when we were told after the June 14th meeting that we had to hold a PIM, well, that's why we decided we could advertise twice and get the July 8th date, because the July 8th was a Thursday, making the 2nd consecutive edition of the Langley Times. We couldn't get the ad approved in time by staff, so we missed that, so we couldn't get the 2 executive dates. So having 1 paper and 1 source makes it very difficult and somewhat onerous on the development community. And I think it's time that staff actually revisit and have a different method of informing people on how to inform that there is a public information being held. Mailouts are normally the best. We have to do mailouts. I think it's the best. Who reads a paper anymore? Who goes to their mailbox and picks out the paper and doesn't throw it in the garbage right away? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, and there's certain areas that don't get a paper. Okay, well, thanks for your comments, and they're very, very valid. Thank you.
Councilor Richter.
Yes, I would just like to make a comment to start, and that is that council does have unfettered discretion and is not constrained by policies in the matters of rezoning of properties. Now, the public input is very, very important, particularly in this area because of the rural character and because of the fact that 4,083 trees are going to be removed off 44.5 acres. Have you done any outreach to area residents? Have you sent them letters or notified them of the website?
No, we haven't. We were going to do that after first and second reading when we had the date set up for the 2 nights and do a major mail out. Hence why we asked for the mail out list the week prior to staff.
Well, it seems to me that, again, because we're in this transitionary period between being in COVID and coming out of COVID, I mean, technically you aren't even required to have a public hearing. It's just public written submissions. And mailing something out with a week's turnaround for public written submissions is insufficient public notification and involvement in this area. I also wanted to make a point. SR1 zoning, you said that it's got lesser coverage. I believe you are wrong. It's 33% coverage in SR1, just as it is in RU1. And I'll certainly follow up with the staff to ascertain that, but I believe I've asked that question and it is 33% lot coverage. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. Thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to reports to council. And E1 is telecommunication tower application number 4, Cypress Land Services at 23718 72 Avenue. And the motion would be to authorize staff to forward, and then that we advise that staff council does not object. Is there anybody who'd like to move?
I'll move that. Yep.
Councilor Long, is there a seconder?
We need cell coverage there.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor
I had
Davis,
my hand up.
Yep.
Mr.
Okay,
Mayor,
Councilor,
I had my hand up.
Go ahead, Councilor Richter.
Yeah, I'm going to move that we not approve this because there was only 7.5% support, and we have a policy that requires 80% report or 80% support, and that policy was not achieved. So I don't think we should be approving this. We might be able to redo the survey, and hopefully there'll be greater public engagement, but I don't think we can push forward with this with a 7.5% support. So I'm moving that we not support this.
All right, thank you.
According to our policy.
Yeah, thank you. So moved and seconded. You can vote against it, and then we automatically move to the next motion. So that's certainly attesting this one way or the other. So we'll start with this one. If it fails, move to the next one. I believe that the first part's forwarding the report and all the minutes and considering, but we'll go through this motion. Then if it fails, we'll go to the second motion.
Okay.
Councillor.
Man, what's the first motion? Because
the first motion is option A. And if that fails, then we go to the second.
Well, no, but I had my hand up and you allowed Councillor Long to jump in and ignore.
Sorry, my head was down reading and I looked up and saw Councillor's moved it. So Councillor Long moved it. So I apologize, but we'll deal with A first. We'll deal with A first, unless you want to challenge it. I have no problem with that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll go to AB if it fails. Councillor Arneson.
Sorry, unmute. Thank you. Thank you, Worship. I did have a question about this. As Councillor Richter has noted, there's only about 7% of a response, and it certainly isn't anywhere near what our requirement is. So I read in the report that last time our cell tower policy was amended, and supported was in 2016. So I'm wondering whether or not, there is some sense that going forward, we should reconsider that. I know it's problematic. There's a balancing of interest, but I do have a problem with looking at something that in fact is the only guideline that we currently have in front of us, and it's not meeting anywhere close to that threshold. So is there some potential feedback from staff about getting this reviewed?
I'll ask Mr. Backen. Mr. Backen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Mr. Seffi might be the best person to comment on the policy, which I think does suggest that if there is no response, it's deemed to be a no vote. But Mr. Seffi, can you elaborate?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, Mr. Backen is correct. If there's no response, Your Worship, it is assumed to, or is taken as opposition. In other words, to put it another way, a vote in support of an application would require to be in writing. And in the absence of receipt of a affirmative vote, it's then taken to not be in support. That said, in response to Councillor Arneson's question, this is not currently something that staff is looking at doing. There is an argument to be made that significant policies of council should be reviewed at least, at time of a new council for every term of a council. But that is really something that staff, unless it has operational issues, would look to council to provide direction to staff to do. So what I'm saying is that this was a direction of council back in 2016. If council wishes to direct staff to amend that, to either interpret the lack of response as a certain way, or to lower the threshold, or just simply to do away with the policy, that is something that staff would look to council to provide it with direction on.
Thank you. Just a quick secondary question then. So would it be the normal course of action under this policy that if there was a similar result that we could ask for repolling?
Your Worship, there's nothing preventing council in terms of asking for another petition. Generally speaking, though, based on experience in cell tower applications, they're fairly controversial, and it is not unusual for there not to be a lack of support. And I suspect that that factor may have been the reason for the policy to be created in the first place.
Right.
So that said, Your Worship, council can direct staff to either go through the process again, or otherwise deal with the application as it stands, which is a recommendation to Industry Canada, because just to remind council, this is provide advice to Industry Canada that have ultimate decision-making authority, and that could be, as has been in the past, contrary to council's recommendations anyway.
Thank you.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. I think this, this, as I think highlighted by previous councillors, there's a real problem here with the policy. I mean, the fact that 53 notices went out, only 4 people responded. To me, the 49 responses should largely be considered I do not care responses, as opposed to negative or positive. We don't run our elections this way. We don't do lots of things this way. So I'm not sure why we have this. So I appreciate the information from Mr. Seffi on what we might need to do to change the policy. But I find it hard to believe we would ever get 80% support. Just a question to staff: is this this kind of tower? Just so I understand, is this a kind of tower that we use just to improve or increase cell ability and improve cell phone reception in the Township of Langley? Is that as basic as this?
Your Worship, that is the I guess the genesis of the application. Staff doesn't have the ability to verify the accuracy, but essentially it is intended by the applicant. Again, we don't have the ability to verify that, whether it is to prevent others or not. We do have a co-location policy, but it is essentially made to enhance existing coverage.
Right, okay, so I mean, yeah, I appreciate that some areas don't want to necessarily have a cell tower, but we have a number of places in the township that have very poor cell coverage. And so it seems we would want to improve that and make it better accessible to people to be able to use their cell phones and other things. So I have a real problem with the policy, and yet I also have a problem with us supporting something that only has 7.5% support based on the policy. So it puts us in a real quagmire, because to me the policy itself is not giving us at all what we need, and yet the 7.5 is hard to ignore. So I'll just leave it there and hear from my other colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Long.
Well, I'm going to put a different slant on it here. Looks like you got 100% approval, because the 4 responses that we got were in favor. Did we get any responses that said, no, we don't want one?
Yes, we did. Read today's items distributed.
Oh, thank you, Councilor Rick. I didn't know you were going to answer. Well, anyway, this is as a public safety issue too, I would say, because as Councilor Whitmarsh has pointed out, that when we have poor reception in the township, there's more and more people using cell phones and not even having house phones anywhere. So I certainly support increasing the ability for our citizens to communicate. It's a safety issue. If you're trying to get a hold of help and you can't get a signal, or you get cut off, that could be an issue. Never mind the what's in the package today, and I guess I'll take a break and have a look at that. But the report in front of me doesn't show anybody that's not in support. In fact, it shows 4 people that are actually supportive of it. If we had a public hearing and only 4 people showed up and they were all in favor of something, we would say, wow, that's pretty good. And maybe we wouldn't want to count the 150,000 people that didn't show up at the public hearing, because like Councilor Whitmer said, perhaps they wouldn't have an opinion one way or another. I think that cell reception is important for public safety. I see this location as not being as controversial as others have been. I see that 4 positive responses as a pretty good thing. I see the 49 that didn't respond as also not being objected to. I'll have to have a look in the council correspondence to see what the issue perhaps is with the other one. But more importantly, I'd like to give you a tiny background on this policy. The policy was structured this way very intentionally. If there's 80% response, which is almost impossible, it doesn't even come to council. It goes directly to Industry Canada. And regardless of what position we take as a council, we have our opinion, we have our input. That's why we're local government. But Industry Canada will make the decision in the end. So I see this as a positive response from the surveys. It's not a perfect system. The 7.5 is a bit of a red herring in my opinion, because you had 4 positive and no negatives in the response, the official response. And we do need to improve cell coverage where possible. So I think this application should go through.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, sorry. And actually, I'm kind of troubled by this. I mean, I guess we can interpret, community responses however we want, and it seems to be like some pretty logical leaps here. So if you send out a notification to someone and it says right at the top, not responding records you as a no vote, and you say, oh, okay, great, I don't need to fill this out on Outback, my wish is gonna be fulfilled. Now all of a sudden we're interpreting that as an I don't care or supportive. It's bizarre to me. If we want to change the policy, change the policy. But I don't understand how, again, why ask for public input if you're just gonna ignore it. The other thing is, I wanted to ask about the setbacks. One concern I had here, sort of digging through this one seems pretty located directly on a property line for an adjacent property owner. And rather than try to figure out who owns it and whether they're in support of it, it was kind of important to me to know, does the property owner to the east support this? Because I look at it, and again, it seems to be right on somebody's property line. Does staff have any information on that?
Your Worship, thank you for the question, Councillor Woodward, through his worship. Staff does not have any information, and I have to admit I did not check the ownership of the adjacent property owner against the 4 responses that were received. So I don't know if we have received any information from the property owner or not. I suspect based on our protocols, I would have been advised if there was a sort of a negative comment or any issues from the adjacent property owners. The fact that we haven't heard anything leads me to believe that there's no concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that's a logical conclusion. I mean, I haven't gone through, because again, we're getting submissions, 15 minutes before the council meeting, which is an issue in and of itself. I just don't know how to vote for this and support it because, I think I agree with some of the comments regarding the need for cell service. I mean, I have a cell phone. But I just a little concerned, maybe it could be relocated away from somebody else's property line if they have an issue with it. And it does seem again like a bigger setback would be appropriate there. Certainly lots of room to do that. So again, not having that information, I'm going to struggle to support it. I'd just be happier to vote against it based upon the policy feedback. Again, just to repeat, again, find it kind of strange that that's being dismissed. All right, thank you.
You, Councilor Richter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, on the items distributed today, the first 3 items are letters relative to the cell tower. 2 of the 3 letters oppose it. And I think that Councillor Whitmarsh summed the conundrum up here very well. On the one hand, we have a policy that says, and as Councillor Woodward pointed out, if you're getting a letter that says you don't have to respond and we're going to count you as a negative vote, then maybe we need to look at policy amendment. But my question then becomes, how can we look at policy amendment at the same time as we're sending something forward that clearly violates the policy? I mean, if that's the principle that we're going to deal with here, then why can't council require a public information meeting for the removal of 4,000 trees because it's part of a policy that like we need to have public input on that. And yet the policy says that we don't have to have a public information meeting, but council's discretion is unfettered. So I'm finding this very confusing. I agree with Councillor Arneson. What I think I would like to see is a resurvey of these properties. And if there's a line on that survey that says if you don't send it in, your vote won't count, get rid of that line. Just send them saying vote yes or vote no.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Yeah, well, let's get that cleared up, Your Worship. I don't see a copy of the survey in here. Does it, now this has been said 2 or 3 times already that that's what the survey says. Don't send it in and it's a no. Now,
Mr. Seffi, we'll ask Mr.
let's
Seffi.
get that clarified because that's putting a whole different slant on it, isn't it?
Yeah, I had the same question. Mr. Seffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. The policy itself, Your Worship, talks about that. The policy itself was carefully crafted. Again, it went through, as I recall, several iterations and input points from council at that time. And it was prepared in collaboration with legal counsel because of the fact that we did not wish to put council in a position to have to do anything. So really, this is just an information piece for council to keep in mind, and also discusses the fact that council may, based on the public input, choose to go a certain way, object or not object. The council policy is actually provided as part of the report, and council can refer to it. And as far as I guess, the need for support to be provided in writing, that's actually in the council policy as well, under the 3.3, it's on page 14 of E1.
So just to be clear, the policy allows for discretion of council when you say they may go one way or the other. Did I hear that right?
That's correct, Your Worship. Council may choose to ignore the petition. Council may choose to support the petition. Council may choose to go a different way altogether.
Okay, thank you.
But Your Worship, can we have
go ahead.
The question answered? Councillor Woodward and Councillor Richter have said that you get a form and on the top it says don't send this in because that means you're against.
I believe it's in the policy, but Mr.
Where it is,
on the specific form that's mailed out, does it state that if it's not returned that it's considered a negative?
Your Worship, I don't have the form in front of me. I do have the policy. I will check with staff and I'll get back to council.
Okay. Yeah. Don't see any speakers. While he's getting that, I'll just speak. I looked at that too, and I was concerned on number one, the low response. And I've always thought if someone's really, usually if you're really against something, we hear about it. And but this one is right beside the freeway, Highway 1. Very important that we have. I think safety is important, and sometimes and it's helpful that we have the discretion built into the policy when we look at it. It's in a very remote area, not a lot of residents is close by to that. And it's serving a huge population when you consider the car count that goes past that freeway every day. The other thing is that we all are carrying these devices that we probably looked at the weather several times today already, maybe several times an hour just because it's of interest. So every time you look at it, there's data. And I know the cell service companies are having a difficult time keeping up. So, it may be that this policy has to be looked at, but it does have that discretion of council. So I don't think we're bound by it. There are other considerations, and that's why I would move to approve it just on those other considerations. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, maybe while Mr. Sefi collects that information, I might, maybe, I don't want to just move it to have it fail, but I mean, maybe again, if I can direct council to look at it, E1, page 27, and if you blow that up, it does seem to sit, the structure and the fence. Maybe it's the fence providing the fenced area providing some kind of a setback, but it does seem to sit directly on somebody's property line. When there seems to be some room to move it more into the owner's property. I don't know if it's unreasonable, but it does seem like a strange location, potentially impacting someone else's property. Maybe the same person owns both properties, I don't know, but it does seem like there's no real setback in place whatsoever there.
Yeah, point of order, Your Worship. I did want to continue speaking, but I don't, I know this has happened in other meetings where perhaps I didn't say that enough, but.
Order, Mr. Mayor. Councillor.
I know.
Okay.
So are you going to allow me to speak again or continue to speak, or I forget where I'm at on the order, but.
Yeah. Okay, excuse me. I'll rule on it. We're really waiting now for Mr. Sefi just to come back. I think, and we should respect the procedure of bylaw. Council Long, just looking at my scribbles here, you did speak twice.
But I didn't finish the last one, but.
But you did actually, because I moved on. So we should
just say point of order to speak again, Mr. Mayor. That's what he does.
So no problem. We'll just wait for Mr. Sefi to come back. I believe Councillor Arneson hasn't spoken a second time. She has her hand up, so we'll let her speak.
Just thank you, Your Worship. More a point of information, and further to Councillor Woodward's point, I think that perhaps one of the considerations for the siting of the cell tower is I believe that the property is in the ALR, and if you move it, it would sort of alienate more farmland than necessary. So that's my logic about why they would put it there, and I understand it could be problematic for the neighbor, no doubt. But I think that might be part of the reasoning as to why they would put it in a particular location, or potentially it's the highest spot on their property and will do the best job for what they need in terms of transmission. So I just wanted to add that as a possibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Sefi, how you make, there your hands up. Do you have an answer for us?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The letter does say, Your Worship, I will read for council. If this petition is not signed by all property owners, or if it is not returned to the Township of Langley within 21 days of the date of this letter, it will be deemed that you do not support the proposal.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Thank you. All right, I think we should move to calling the question on this so we can move on. I'm going to call the question on the motion, which is the A, and again, if A fails, we just move to B. I'll call this question. All those in favor and opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, we have Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Davis, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Richter, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Arneson opposed. So we move on to, if someone could move the motion with the B option in it.
Okay.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah.
Do you wish?
Mr. Mayor, do we have the latitude here to resurvey without the line? If you don't send it in, you won't get your vote.
That might be contrary to policy. I'm thinking so. I think we can just go with B. I'm happy to support B. I mean, we've gone through the process, and this is, I respect council. Do you want to move it? Is there a seconder to B? Councillor Arneson. Do we still need discussion on this, Councillor Richter, Councillor Long?
I do. I sure do. Yeah.
Councillor Long.
So we're changing policy on other parts of our council agendas. So I don't see that that's out of order. But I just wanted to point out that we are saying that we object, and I'd like to know what we're basing that on, because the three letters that we got today now that I see there,
so
only one objects because it's on ALR land and they think they shouldn't be, but they're all over the township on ALR land. In fact, I was talking to our friend down on Zero Avenue. He said that's the best cow on his pasture is his cell tower because it brings him a steady income. So the ALR argument doesn't really fit in. The other one is very much supportive of it. And the third letter is from someone that says that we are all going to have some issue with our health by having cell towers anywhere on planet Earth. So I don't see any objection from the public to this tower, and yet the motion is that we object. So I would support maybe resurveying, which is goofy, but I still support putting the tower there, and I don't think that there's enough evidence in front of this council to object to it. I'm not sure why council voted that way, but that's what they did.
So the vote probably shows that council objects, and they're objecting on the basis of the policy and of the results of the polling. And if we need to change that, it could be done at a certain time. Certainly council does have the ability to repoll, but and Industry Canada still has the ability to put that cell tower up there. And all of the minutes and all of the correspondence will be forwarded to them at the same time. So I don't know if we want to go repoll. The answer will probably come back the same because people are busy. It goes in the garbage and they move on, or they reread it and say, well, the answer is there. So, Councillor Woodward.
No, I just wanted to add before, maybe, if we're going to move it, I can speak when somebody moves.
It's moved. I believe, was it moved and seconded?
I don't.
Bauer? I'm not sure. I thought I did. I could be wrong. Yeah, Councillor Richter moved it.
Yes,
Councillor
Your
Arnson
Worship,
seconded it. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
right.
on the table. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I'll speak to then. Item B. I mean, I actually, I'm not going to say why other people are voting the way they did. I don't like it when people do that. I object to it because of the proximity to someone's property line, which hasn't been clarified. So, if that can be clarified, and I hear Councillor Arneson's comment about preserving usable land, but so that's why I'm objecting. I would like that added to the reasoning for the objection. And if somebody wants to shift it, repetition, I'd probably support it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna call the question on B. All those in favor and opposed, and that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Move on to E2. This is 2021 UBCM resolution, accelerated south of Fraser transit service improvements. Can I have someone move that? Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Arneson. Councillor Richter, you wish to speak to it? Or question?
Sorry. Yes, I do. Actually, I want to add an amendment. And the amendment I would like to add is and increasing bus service at the end of that and activating the South Fraser Community Rail Interurban Corridor to Chilliwack. That would be the amendment that I would add.
Okay. Is there a seconder? I don't. Councillor Arneson. Okay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Richter?
Yeah, it seems to me that the people who have been working on the interurban rail corridor study, and they surveyed a number of different communities. A lot of those communities are the communities to the east of us, and they've expressed a very high interest in having that interurban corridor opened up. At least I would think from Langley through to Chilliwack. But it would seem to me that if we're sending this to UBCM, we should also include the possibility that that interurban corridor be included in their discussions and any further studies.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I appreciate that wanting to include the interurban rail discussion, but I don't know. I mean, I know that members of council have received emails at various times about the interurban rail, but I don't know if I certainly don't feel I know enough about it or understand all the details enough about it to put that in a resolution to UBCM. I feel that I'm certainly supportive of the resolution as it's written in our document, but I think that adding the interurban, I'm not sure I'm supportive of that. Possibly to hear more about it and maybe have a second motion that might come at a later time when we truly understand as a council what that means and what that is really involves. I'm not sure that all of council, maybe I'm the only one that's not well versed in it, but I think I'd best to leave that amendment off, and I'd rather keep it the way that it is.
Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I realize it is a bit of a challenge. I'm supportive of this. I think that this has been a discussion that's been going on for quite some time in a policy area. I guess my challenge is, further to Councillor Whitmarsh's comments, is that if something's been drafted and council hasn't had time to review it, we could have added that as an amendment prior to discussing it today. So I know some of us are more conversant with this than others, and that's just the way things go. However, I do feel that it's advantageous to put this out in the public realm. I know there's been a lot of advocacy for this, and just to see where it goes. I mean, I think that it is something whose time has come. And therefore, I think that in addition to what we're already proposing, which is pretty straightforward and, you know, I don't think will be challenged, but add this as something else that is more visionary, I think, in terms of the scope of what we need to do. So that's why I support this. Thank you.
Councillor Long.
Your Worship, there's no mention anywhere in the report of the interurban. The motion, the recommendation talks about planned infrastructure and increasing existing bus service. These are things that actually exist. The concept of the interurban, as interesting as it is, and how we probably should be discussing it as a council at some point, will render this resolution, I think, it'll render it to the back of the line, because people are going to wonder what on earth is, there's no planned expansion of the interurban, which is what it says in the recommendation, that we're going to ask that we expedite what we're already planning to do. So to me, it nullifies the intent of this motion, which is to get the planned stuff on the table. It should be a separate motion and it should be a separate discussion. And I don't think this council has ever had that discussion or endorsed any interurban plan. And there are many, 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 many challenges with that line. It's as wonderful as it could be. And I'm, you know, there'd be nobody better than me that would like to see trains going, because I love trains. But it does not belong in this motion. So I think if the councillor wants to talk about that, it should be a separate notice of motion, which we used to get lots of, and we can discuss it separately, and maybe it can be forwarded separately. But knowing how the UBCM works also, by the way, when this goes up for debate, I think it's going to be very puzzling to the delegates as to what on earth are we talking about. There is no planned interurban expansion, as there are planned expansions of rapid transit infrastructure and bus service.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. Actually, this is the time to put this forward. It says right here, transit service improvements. The interurban, for whatever reason, Councillor Whitmarsh, I could put you through to a couple people that could give you all the information. 80 years ago, my dad used to get in on Milner and be in Vancouver in less than an hour. And I know this is an old argument. And if he got the midnight flight home, he'd be here within an hour. The line mainly is still there. It's a lot less expensive and a lot less problems than I just heard a councillor say it could be. When you look at successful, and I'm a dairy farmer, but when you look at successful routes or methods of transportation, there's not just one, there's two or three that interconnect. So I'm going to support this 100%. And this is the time to and if they don't know anything about it and it confuses the issues, then they better get organized, because like I say, hey, they're talking about the yesterday, or was it today, on the radio about the SkyTrain. This could be an absolute complement to different routes. I mean, you don't have to travel far. You go to England, there's big trains, town trains, country trains, and you get on one train, get off another, and get on another, and you get there. Anyhow, my point is, absolutely, this is the time, and I totally support this 100%. And I can put information on. If you don't know enough about it, I can get you to the right people that can explain it. Thank you very much. I'm going to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I think that maybe this would be a complementary motion, separate and distinct, because there's an awful lot of discussion that we need to do. And I am familiar with this. You know, the interesting thing, Mr. Mayor, yourself being vice chair of Transit, we are a member of TransLink, and we have our citizens pay into the TransLink system, either taxes or fees or charges, telephone bills, whatever. I still always get disappointed myself, as probably other citizens do, that, you know, they keep breaking ground for other projects, and Langley keeps getting left behind. And I guess others have kind of say, well, TransLink won't deliver anything here, and, you know, maybe we look at other means. But I still don't know what the status of the West Coast Express, because I was under the impression it was an expensive endeavor. And when the Sky Crane went out to the rainy side of the river, that's Coquitlam, Moody, some degree Maple Ridge, mostly Coquitlam, but I guess it's not Maple Ridge yet. But I was wondering what the status would be. So, I mean, you know, I think maybe a separate motion, but right now, from what I understand, that UBCM needs more specific motions. So I'm not sure, this might be better to have a separate, it doesn't mean to say it can't be looked at, but more of a separate resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Thanks for that. No, I kind of was a bit, caught off guard by some of the comments here, because I read this motion and I said, I kind of saw the same thing: accelerate and expand transit service improvements south of the Fraser. And I think that's what the interurban corridor is trying to do. You know, some of us may have some concerns about some of the details of it. I've certainly had some questions for the group advocating for it, but why not send it to UBCM, send it to provincial government? Why wouldn't we want more transit service, at least on the face of it? And if it's a project that doesn't have any merit, then presumably the BC NDP government won't fund it. TransLink opposing it has kind of made it more interesting to me. In fact, it might actually have some pretty good merit if TransLink's opposing it. So I think let the process play out. Why not let the membership of the UBCM debate the motion and amend it out if that's what they feel? But it's pretty obviously would be a benefit for the Township of Langley. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And why wouldn't we support that? So I'm confused why the amendment wouldn't be supported. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I did put my name down on the list to be the next speaker. So the TransLink has reviewed the interurban proposal as put forward by a certain group, talking about the route that went through the valley around a lake that was designed in 1812, and the lake was drained, I think, in 1821 or something. So, it had a purpose at the time. So the routing itself has challenges, and that's one of the challenges. I think what we should be looking at in support of the planned expansion, the provincial government has come out and said that they want to look at rail through the valley. TransLink and BC Transit are working together to look at transit throughout the valley, not from here to Hope, and that's something that can be supported. By hanging it on the interurban, which it may or may not have challenges. I mean, I've looked at it. I reviewed it. I read the reports. I don't see that as a viable alternative to taking my car into Chilliwack. It's slower than the slowest bus, but I am all for getting rail into the valley. So I'm going to go through the list, and I'd be happy to make an amendment to take out the word interurban, but to look at rail through the valley and not be specific to a certain project that may or may not have merit. I'm just telling you what my opinion is, and I know TransLink looked at it, the mayors had looked at it, but I'm really supportive of getting rail. And I think by nailing it down or by hanging our hat on one type of or one certain route, I think we're restricting the ability. Transit, certainly in TransLink, the whole purpose of putting expensive rail is to put it where population is going to be, to serve population. Taking a train around a non-existent lake just north of the U.S. border and then back up again had merit in 1812. It doesn't today. So there are other routes that may have merit and that would serve the valley and serve our growing population much better. So I'll go through this because I'd love to see I might make an amendment to just take out the interurban part and just call it rail in the valley. We want to get rail to Chilliwack. I don't, you know, it's a very expensive. The province will have to come forward with funding. The federal government will have to come forward with funding. This isn't going to be happening just the local funding. It's going to be a combination. So there has to be a very solid business case for any rail, no matter who puts it forward. So just sort of my comments on this. I think it's good to add it, but the way it's worded right now, it's restrictive, and we need to open it up and let them say, hey, we really want to see some good transit through the valley. Okay, so I'll go with Councillor Kuntz next.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those comments. And I know that I've gone to some of these sessions where they're talking about interurban and have been following all of the even some of the TransLink and the lack of support from TransLink. So, I mean, if there was a separate motion, I think would it not be stronger for them, especially going into the UBCM, and also, you know, recognizing that, you know, TransLink has already basically said, you know, we're not interested. So, would that sort of handcuff, you know, our desire to have this original motion? Would that, you know, make it less powerful? So I would be interested in maybe changing the wording, because, you know, I agree with, you know, what you were saying, Mayor, about the rail through the valley and, you know, having that winding through the ALR. So, you know, it's definitely an awesome idea. And, you know, maybe we just need to, you know, support it in a different way, using different language. I don't know, like what you said. Anyway, so those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just want to clarify what the wording of my amendment was. I believe the wording of my amendment as proposed is the after service, because it says including expediting the construction of planned rapid transit infrastructure and increasing bus service. So my amendment is, and activating the South Fraser Community Interurban Rail Corridor to Chilliwack. So, I mean, I could put in and or there, which would allow for the mayor's suggested change. I think that before we decide to build brand new out there, maybe there should be a more detailed study to determine whether or not the as is that already exists and that we have passenger rates on is a viable option. I'm not convinced it's not a viable option. So I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if the clerk could read back the amendment, the wording of the amendment.
Yeah. Ms. Bauer.
The amendment was to amend the motion to include an increased bus service. And further, the amendment was to and activating the South Fraser Community Interurban Corridor to Chilliwack.
Okay.
Yeah, I think rail was interurban rail corridor to Chilliwack.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Mayor, if you want to put forward your amendment to drop rail, I would like to suggest that maybe what we do is activating rail and or the interurban corridor to Chilliwack. Like, I don't think we should be cutting the interurban off. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying we would. I'm saying, we're having just studying rail for the valley, wherever it goes. If they decide that that's the route they want to go, I don't see it. The business case is there, but making sure that we're not limiting it. We really want to see rail. I think that should be our focus. We want to see rail going through to Hope, basically.
Yeah. No,
why can't they do that? So
we need to get rail out there.
Yeah. So with the to make an amendment at the end of yours, then I would amend it. Amendment to the amendment, I guess, would be to amend it to and other rail corridors that would meet the needs of our growing population, something like that, and other rail corridors. It doesn't limit it then to the one. So if that's, I'd move that as an amendment. And second by Councillor Davis. Okay. On the amendment to the amendment, does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Whitmarsh, your hand is it still up from before?
Yeah, well, it was up for 4. I could speak to this as well. It's the
Sure.
same.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments from council. I have attended a couple of the sessions given on the interurban rail and did learn a lot. I just feel I've got a lot more to learn on the validity of it and how it'll all work. I am absolutely committed and supportive of having as much public transit as we can get into the area, certainly improving public transit for our community, including rail. So I think I like this amendment change better. I think to talk about different rail corridors and not specific to any one is probably better. I still prefer that they were 2 motions, so I'm absolutely committed to it. I just like the idea of not convoluting the motion and instead having 2 separate motions that we take to UBCM. But the amendment as it is, I'm more supportive of that with more general language about rail corridors in the Fraser Valley.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis?
Simply put, the fact your amendment gives a bigger umbrella, I think that UBC, I don't think will take this and pull out just the interurban and say, you know, what they want to say. With this in it, it actually complements it. It makes everybody think rail. I mean, even the old BC Hydro goes to Abbotsford. You can spear off and go up the middle of the freeway, but that's not for me to say. But going around that lake, a lot of things happened back then that they looked at differently. And I gonna watch what I say here, Mayor Froze. That throws an intervention. That throws things a little astray because there's every inch of that lake now is being farmed for agriculture. And could you imagine us now draining a lake anywhere in Canada? But anyhow, so yes, I absolutely support this. Let's get it out there. Let's get them. It's not just get them thinking, because people are thinking it. We just have to get the ball rolling, and I just compliments it. Thank you.
Thanks. And there's now fewer mosquitoes. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I was just wondering if the clerk could read back the amendment to the amendment. So I've got the exact wording here.
Ms. Bauer.
The amendment was to add to the amendment to the amendment was to add to the amendment to include and other rail corridors.
In the Fraser Valley?
I did not get that, as the original amendment contained interurban rail corridor to Chilliwack, and the amendment to the amendment was just simply to add and other rail corridors.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's inclusive.
Is that the motion that the amendment to the amendment
to the amendment, yeah,
is now and other rail corridors?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on the amendment to the amendment. All those in favor and opposed? Carries. And to the amendment, call the question. All those in favor to the amendment as amended and opposed? Councillor Long opposed. It carries. And to the motion as amended, all those in favor and opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. All right. Move on to Archaeological Site Protection Policy, E3. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson, seconder. Councillor Whitmarsh, discussion. Councillor Richter.
I was just actually going to request if we could have a short recess at some point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why don't we, that sounds good, because we're moving into, why don't we take it after this? We'll delve through this one.
Okay.
We'll take
So has the motion been moved? I'm happy to move.
Yes, it's moved and seconded, yeah, on the Archaeological Site Protection Policy. Did you wish to speak to that?
No, I'm just to say I'm very supportive of this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I can admit I put the volume of the agenda. I didn't get into every detail of this particular one, and I wanted to spend a bit more time with it. So I just actually wanted to move deferral for one meeting to just have a chance to actually read it.
Okay, is there a seconder to the deferral?
I'll second that.
I saw Councillor Davis's hand go up, and I heard lots of voices. So Councillor Davis seconds it. Councillor Long or Councillor Woodward, do you wish to speak to deferral?
I do, just a bit. just before it's criticized. I think that, ideally, I just would want to take some time. I did have some questions that come up, and I realized I'm going to take a bit more time doing a bit more of a look into it. And I did want to discuss it with the senior management prior to a debate on it. That was all. And I just, not looking for a lot of time, just 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Long.
It's a very important motion, not the deferral, but the actual report. It talks about very sensitive areas. We're under construction in many parts of the township, but it's extremely sensitive. It's very important, very topical. I think we should proceed. I don't think there's anything in here that would be a concern. At least there isn't any to me, but a concern would be that we don't move ahead with it. So I'm going to support delaying.
I'm going to ask Mr. Seffi, just a quick question. I know this is a policy, it seeks to comply with some provincial regulations. We did have a presentation from staff. Does 2 weeks, was it detrimental to the policy, or can we wait 2 weeks in your estimation as staff?
Your Worship, thank you for the opportunity. I guess to respond directly to your question, I don't think 2 weeks is going to result in any significant detrimental impact. That said, this is one, pursuant to, as you've referenced, Your Worship, pursuant to information that's been shared with Council on the archaeological overview assessment that Council's given the blessing to proceed with developing policies around. And secondly, it is really to deal with areas that may, as a result of construction, excavation, foundation work, etc., reveal some archaeological importance, not having previously been identified as an area of known significance, archaeological significance. So it's intended to deal with what they refer to as chance finds. With that said, Your Worship, staff is available right now. Ms. Horrocks is online, and she has prepared a bit of a table. It is not a presentation, but just a table, just to sort of summarize the, I guess, the main objectives of the policy, if Council so wishes. And otherwise, I think referral by 2 weeks is fine as well. So whichever way Council wishes to go forward, Your Worship, staff would be fine with that.
Okay, thank you. So I think because this is a deferral motion that we're debating right now, we'll leave the presentation aside. If the deferral is successful, then perhaps Ms. Horrocks can come to the next meeting and provide that information. But I think we'll be jumping ahead to talk about the report. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just want to add that, there'd be some stuff I could just, I just think it's a meaty one. I just was asking if Council doesn't want to give me that time. I totally respect that. And I think from time to time, we're all going to ask for this on some issues. And I certainly appreciate the support. And even when next time Councillor Long asks for a deferral,
okay,
I'll support it.
Keep it to the deferral. Everyone's individual. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of deferral? And opposed? We got Councillor Arneson, Councillor Kunz, Councillor Long opposed. Okay, so deferral carries. Thanks. Well, we'll take a lots of agenda as a 5-minute break. Okay, to go grab a glass of water and stretch your legs. That's what I had to jump up. I was getting so thirsty there. I had to jump out and get a glass of water there a minute ago.
Maybe we could make it 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes.
It's 3:30. Yeah. No,
yep.
Between yeah. Okay.
Yeah. 3:27. How's
Great.
that?
Thank you.
slowest bus. What's that temperature out there? Can't get anything done.
I can hear you whispering, Jack.
I'm whispering.
Just depends who you're whispering to.
I was outside looking at my plants and how they're drying up.
The cows are walking around with their tongues hanging out. We got serious heat stress going on in this herd.
Oh yeah, I can believe it.
We got fans and everything, but the problem is the last 2 nights, the temperature hasn't gone down. They can get heat stress, and then they can kind of cool down from midnight till 8 in the morning. But the last couple mornings, they haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, the same with chickens. Always wait for that cool evening, and we're not getting it.
Oh yeah. Well,
Farmers are losing birds.
Worse.
It's terrible.
It's worse. Like cows they generally won't die unless they're downers and they're out in the sun. But chickens, they can't help it. Oh
yeah, I know.
Anyhow. Okay, well, I'll just beep out. Talk to you in a sec.
approximately 50.78, I guess it's thousands of dollars in the other category. And my question is, shouldn't we be breaking down the other category into its own separate pie chart? Because it seems like an awful big piece of the pie just to be called other. But what's in it, and in future reports, can we have a separate pie chart breakdown of other?
I see Ms. Ruff is here. I'll ask Ms. Ruff if she can comment.
Your Worship, that would be many of our other departments, but yes, we could break that down further for council.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question on E5. All those in favor and opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. And move on to E6, Agriculture Land Commission application number 100384. This is Stevens at 1,232 Street. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh and a seconder. Councillor Kunst, Councillor Richter.
Sorry, I didn't take my hand down. I have nothing on this one. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to staff, I'm wondering, when I read the report, I was looking at where the opportunity is for the neighboring properties to give their opinion about whether or not they'd like filming expanded there. So if staff could clarify, is that through the Agricultural Land Commission and their jurisdiction, or is that the township with our filming guidelines? Thank you.
Mr. Steffi.
Your Worship, this is in the rural areas. It is not in an area that I believe can be designated as a hot zone, a filming hot zone, and as such is not subject to the requirements for the proponents to petition the neighborhood. I think that's likely what Councillor Arneson is referring to. This is in front of council to refer to the Land Commission to allow for what is beyond the permissible, I guess, non-farm uses in terms of filming, in terms of days of filming on the property that the ALC regulations allow. So hence the need for the referral.
I'm trying to unmute. Sorry, I have a secondary question then. So is it the case that if this goes to the ALC, if you could clarify, and they are agreeable to the 60 days or less of filming per year, that it is then up to the township to monitor and make sure that there are no more than those days? I'm just trying to pinpoint whose job it is to make sure that this is proceeding in a satisfactory manner and not exceeding the number of days.
Your Worship, this is a matter of Agricultural Land Commission regulations. So the Township of Langley would not be in a position to regulate those regulations. It's really up to the Land Commission to enforce those. So we would not be in a position to monitor or enforce the Land Commission's requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any further discussion, so I'll call the question on E6. All those in favor and opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Woodward is opposed. The motion carries. We move on to E7, and I'm going to ask the clerk.
I would move number A on E7. Number A, I'll move.
Thanks, but I'm just going to ask the clerk because it's something kind of new for us. It's a bit of a different way of doing things, and there's some reasons behind that. And so I appreciate the move. I'll look for a second in just a second, but in my discussion is, we go through A. If for some reason that fails, we go to B. If that fails, then C is an automatic, goes to the ALC with no comment. So I just wanted to give that background. Ms. Bauer, did I kind of catch that correctly?
Yes, Your Worship, you did.
Okay,
the staff has provided the three options. If either A or B passes, staff would follow that direction. If A nor B passes, then it would just default to C.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so is there a seconder, Councillor Ferguson's motion for A? Councillor Arneson, and I'll go to questions. I have Councillor Richter, Woodward, Ferguson. Richter, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to move to table till after special closed.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Councillor Davis. So on tabling, Ms. Bauer, is there discussion? There's no discussion, is that correct? or is there discussion? I can't recall.
No, sir, there's not.
Okay. So I'll call the question on tabling it to after special closed. All those in favor and opposed? Councilor Arneson's opposed. It carries. Thank you. So we'll table until after special close. So, okay. Remember that. All right. Move on to bylaws for first and second reading. And we have F1, official community plan amendment and rezoning application number 10219 and development permit application number 101199, Quadra Holdings at 82642 8th Street and 20880 83 Avenue, bylaw 5725, 5726, and bylaw 5727. Can I have a motion?
So
please?
moved.
Councillor Long.
Second.
Second by Councillor Kunst. Councillor Ferguson. You're muted, Councillor Ferguson. You're on mute.
Idea here. I was wondering the rental, if I may, is subject to Canadian CMAC or something, Canadian, whatever that standards, and that's so much percent below would be regular rental rates, if I may, through the chair.
Mr. Seffi.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 410 units proposed, Your Worship. All of them, 100%, are intended to be rental. That does not require any external bodies, agencies involvement. It just requires a housing agreement between the township and the proponent. As far as other aspects of the proposal are concerned, Your Worship, 30% of the units are intended to be affordable in terms of meeting the definition of affordable housing, not just CMHC, but also BC Housing, as well as Metro Vancouver and Township of Langley. The proponent has indicated that they will do that. They will provide the affordable housing, as well as additional 10% being 10% of the units that is being below market. So those are matters that CMHC will be able to provide, I guess, incentives, financial incentives to the applicant, but the Township of Langley is not a party to those. Those are just, I guess, conditions that are being met by the proponent to take advantage of certain offers, if you will.
And Mr. Safety, if I may, through the chair, this will also give an opportunity to finish off more of 208s in that particular, I call it that particular section, if I may. Is that correct, through the chair?
That's correct, Your Worship, yes.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, speak, done speaking.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I just, want to say how pleased I am that this has come onto the agenda. We've talked about having more rental units in the Township of Langley for a long time, particularly affordable units. This is a significant project, demonstrates that it is possible to do these sorts of things in our community in partnership with the township and working together to create a great rental kind of facility. So I'm really excited about this and would definitely be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I just want to express my support for this. I think we're very fortunate that we have a very progressive developer that's put forward this package, and it's using funds that are coming from another source to provide affordable housing in our communities. So I think that there'll be a whole generation or two of individuals that will definitely be supported, and their lives will be enhanced by having this, not to mention the fact that there are commercial components to this, which will also, I think, really dovetail with our mixed use strategy in the area. So I'm very supportive. We've got some modest density increase, but the upside of that is we'll have more people living closer to their services and advancing what is really most needed further to the Housing Action Plan, which is more affordable renting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, and of course, it's who wouldn't be supportive of such a great project? But I'm just wondering, I guess under public consultation, there's no public information meeting being called for this one, even though it's quite a large development. So I just thought I'd point that out to council so that we can, consider these things when we make decisions. But I'm very much in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh, you wish to speak again? No. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the question on F1. All those in favor and opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we move on to bylaws for first, second, and third reading. G1 is soil deposit removal bylaw amendments, bylaw number 5724. Can I have a motion, please? Somebody move G1. Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Arneson. Thank you. I know this. If there's any discussions, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Councillor Woodward opposed. It carries unanimously.
Mayor Froze, it doesn't carry unanimously if I'm opposed.
Oh, sorry. My phone was ringing. I was hanging it up at the same time. getting kind of. Yeah, you're right. Councillor Woodward's opposed. Yeah, thank you. Got to keep me on track. Bylaws for consideration at third reading, H1, and this is rezoning application number 10643 and development permit application number 101193. This is bylaw 5723. Stevovich, could I have a motion, please? Someone move H1.
So move, Ferguson.
Councillor Ferguson moves it, and a seconder, please. A second, Councillor Whitmarsh and Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I referenced last meeting and I'll reference again that of the 111 significant trees on this property, 105 of them are going to be removed, and there will be less replacements than there are removals. So I'm not in favor of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed?
I'm opposed.
Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson opposed. The motion carries. We move on to bylaws for final adoption. I1 is drinking water conservation bylaw update, bylaw number 5716. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Kunst in a second, or one second. Councillor Davis. Councillor Richter, is your hand up from before? Do you wish to speak to this?
This is I1. No, I don't.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Leftover. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thought so. All right, all those in favor and opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. I2 is drainage development works agreement bylaw, bylaw number 5697. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Kunst moves it, and seconded by Councillor Davis. Any discussion on I2? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Councillor Woodward opposed. Councillor Arneson opposed. It carries. Thank you. Okay, I3, I will need two motions. One's for, start with the bylaw. This is Decenti Development Corp, bylaw number 5628 on I3. Have a motion for the bylaw. Someone will move the bylaw. Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Arneson. Any discussion on the bylaw? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. And now on the development permit application number 101151, could I have a motion on the DP? Councillor Davis and a seconder. Councillor Arneson, discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor and opposed? That carries. Thank you. I4 is rezoning application number 100503, Generis Properties Limited. Again, two motions. I'll go for bylaw 5436 first. Could I have a motion, please?
So move, Ferguson.
Councillor Ferguson moves it. Seconder. Can I have a second? Councillor Kunst, any discussion on the bylaw? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. On the development permit, application number 100945.
Your Worship, I think there was somebody was opposed, Councillor Arneson.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Arneson opposed. I missed that. So the bylaw carries with Councillor Arneson opposed.
Move development permit, Ferguson.
Councillor Ferguson moves the DP. Councillor Davis seconds it. Seeing no discussion. All those in favor and opposed? Councillor Arneson opposed. It carries. Thank you. We want to correspondence. Rail Safety Week. Can we have a motion on receipt? Councillor Davis and a second by Councillor Long. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Minutes of committees. We have Tree Protection Advisory Committee of June 8th. We have Recreation, Culture and Parks Advisory Committee of June 9th. Seniors Advisory Committee of June 16th. Council Process Committee of June 21. Can I have a motion for Council to adopt the minutes from the Council Process Committee and receive the other Advisory. Councillor Coons moves it. Councillor Davis seconds it. Councillor Davis, we should speak to the minutes.
Actually, it wasn't the minutes.
Oh.
It was Rail Safety Week.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Rail time is every day. I know I sound like a boring record, but with a community that has a rail right through it, and with the expense that we're doing with our rail, we're upgrading it. Smith Crescent now has a wigwag. They're working on bringing the rail up the system, but you can't forget about a train. Every day is train time, and I know I'm talking to the council, but should be. I like when they come out and they go into a younger audience and let them know that the train is can be a very, very dangerous thing. You don't get a second chance with a train. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go back to K1. There's no discussion on that. I'll call the question on K1. All those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Thank you. Now we move on to K2, Tree Protection Advisory Committee recommended motion. And
Moved it.
Councillor Whitmarsh moves it. Councillor Arneson seconds it. Councillor Davis, did you wish to speak to this? Or your hand's still up from before?
Sorry, no, I'll take my hand down.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Councillor Whitmarsh, if you could speak to this. And before you speak, I just want to ask you a question. If this is part of the original terms of reference, I'm not sure. I thought, we're asking for an extension, but I'm not sure if we're asking for an extension that's not in the terms of reference. And does there need to be something else done? Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think the terms of reference, I think, indicated that more than likely the process would take approximately 1 year. So I'm happy to hear from staff what their comments are if this needs to be an adjustment. But I think the goal of TPAC, or the ask of TPAC, is to extend the date past 1 year, which would be October of 2021, to extend that until the community forest management strategy has been presented to council. And so that TPAC has the opportunity to still have the same kinds of input that they would expect to have into the management strategy process. And then when it gets recommended or sent to council, that would be the end of the role of TPAC. And that's what's asked here, is to extend it for that time. But staff may want to comment if this is necessary, but I think this was, based on what I understood, it was necessary to make this request.
Thank you. Is there, Mr. Seffi, is there someone to speak to that in terms of reference and the extension?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's really nothing else I could add to Councillor Whitmarsh's comments. He's quite correct and accurate in how he framed the request of the committee. All I can advise in addition to that is that some of the work that's requiring the council's request or rather the committee's request for council to consider the extension is COVID related, Your Worship. Some of the work was originally anticipated to be completed sooner, but because of COVID, it just wasn't possible to do that. So that's why the committee has asked for this extension. And as Councillor Whitmarsh has said, currently we anticipate the process for the canopy work to be concluded by the end of this year. So, but I think it's best to frame it again, or to rather request the extension to be in line with how Councillor Whitmarsh put it, which is until the conclusion of the work, presentation to council of the findings.
Mm-hmm.
So the duration, so it says to extend the duration of the committee to allow for active participation. Okay, I get that. Until the conclusion of the work. Is that wording that you feel would be better on the motion? We could do a quick amendment if that's Mr. Seffi.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. So if Councillor Whitmarsh, if you just want to move that amendment.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of order. The
Sure.
motion as presented on the agenda is quite clear, and Councillors Whitmarsh and Arneson moved and seconded them. Why are we amending this now without an amending motion?
That's what I'm asking for.
Okay.
I was asking Councillor Whitmarsh if he wished to amend it, just to have that line. So I'm not going forward until I get an amending
Your Worship,
motion.
maybe I can just provide additional comments.
Sure.
I don't think an amendment is necessary. I think the motion does capture what
Okay.
Councillor Whitmarsh did in fact
Okay,
space
fair enough.
and move. Yeah.
No, appreciate that. Thanks. That was my interpretation that you needed that. Okay.
So the
I'll call,
motion as presented is what
yeah,
we're
it is.
on?
That's what's on right now. There is no amendment. It's clarified by staff. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, we move to
Mr.
K3.
Mayor, I'd like to move K3.
To table. Do you wish to? You want to move K3? Okay.
I don't want to
K3.
take it. I want to
K3 is moved. Seconded. Is there a seconder? Councillor Woodward seconds it. Discussion, Councillor Richter.
Yes, I think that it's very clear that this group of 8 lots have been dealt with as a grouping all the way through. I think it is not appropriate for us to split this up, particularly as a reconsideration is in front of the ALC. I'd be worried that if we proceed by splitting them up, we're only going to have to end up redoing work at some point down the road. I would prefer to wait for the decision of the ALC and carry through on their decision. I think that their earlier decision is quite clear. All 8 must come out at the same time. All 8 have to have the drainage provisions, the fencing, etc. But as there is a reconsideration in play, I think we need to wait for the ALC to conduct its due process on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor. Okay, I've got Long, Ferguson, Arnes, and Whitmarsh. I don't know which. I just saw Whitmarsh up there. So I'll go to Long. Go ahead. Councillor Long, Ferguson, Arnes.
I'm not going to support the motion. We had a delegation of a number of property owners. Councillor Richter, and I don't like to mention other, well, I'm sure it will. She was on council when the council of the day moved.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Is there no reason for Councillor Long to be calling me out? I didn't call.
Councillor Long, just speak to the motion, please. Thanks.
Council of 2008, of which Councillor Richter was a member, moved to move this property out of the in the OCP for very important employment lands. So the application was made based upon that decision. So that gave the proponent a reason to apply. The landowners who spoke to us in delegation earlier talked about their desire to move forward. It is not for this council to stop landowners from developing or putting adjustments or zoning requirements on their properties. It's for us to entertain them, to talk about it, and to rule upon them. So when we defer things like this, I don't think it's in our purview to do that. I don't think it's what we're supposed to be doing as elected officials. The Agricultural Land Commission functions in its own way with its own rules, and whatever it decides to do should not necessarily affect us. We did push this forward to the ALC back in 2008. Decisions have been made as a result of that, and now we have landowners who are applying to come forward. There is no, in my opinion, dependent on the 8 versus the 6 at this decision that we're making here today. These folks deserve first and second reading. I don't think that this was a very wise motion that was made at the last meeting, but it was done, and I see now it's on the agenda, and it's now been moved and seconded. But I, for one, and I would hope that the rest of council might consider that this is not appropriate. We're not here to gauge what the ALC will or will not do. And it was very clearly pointed out in the delegation that this could take a long time and it could be harmful to the proponents. We've heard from many on council that the industrial and employment lands are very important to the township, to any community, especially in Metro Vancouver. And that's what these lands are proposed to become, our employment lands, and there's tremendous benefits. And I don't feel that there's any hardship or any harm going to come to the one landowner that isn't coming forward yet, but that these 6 that are coming forward is legitimate. Whatever happens will happen. But this is a very complicated process that's going to take quite a bit of time in terms of the regional growth strategy adjustments and the OCP amendment. So I think we should move forward with first and second, but I think the best thing to do is to vote this one down, and the other 2 motions will sort of take care of the timing, because the delegates said that they were happy to discuss the whole concept of amenity contributions and the whole future of commercial and industrial lands. But this particular motion definitely puts a roadblock in front of it, and I don't think that's appropriate, so I will not be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Well, it was an interesting statement by my colleague there, Mr. Mayor. Nowhere, Mr. Mayor, maybe the clerk can help me out. Nowhere in this motion does to say that this council is opposed to the application. Now, I just want to make that very clear because I was getting some kind of a lecture from indicating that we're opposed. We're not opposed to this application. We are following procedure, and was pointed out very professionally by Councillor Whitmarsh that we are a child of the province, and the Agricultural Land Commission can rule accordingly, and it really doesn't matter what we do. Their decision will be final and binding. So all we're saying is that we have been approached by letter by two of the other properties within the 8, indicating that they had some concerns. That is our job, to look at the information that's been provided to us and rule accordingly. I understand the comments made by Mr. Tadei and his group, and he is well respected in his community, Mr. Tadei, and his team is well respected. But this is a difficult case, and we have to follow some reasoning and follow some procedures and protocols. And I think the best thing to do is to get those 8 in place, move accordingly, and it would be a lot easier if everybody, all the neighbors work together. But those property owners, they won't be hindered at all. They will receive their financial remuneration regardless. So I think it's a good motion. I think it's a fair motion. I think it's appropriate to move with it, and I'm supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Arneson?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I won't be supporting this motion. I didn't support it in the original discussion because I think further to all of the conversations that we've had and leading up to this very point, I don't see what merit there is in somewhat. Sure, it's council's discretion to make this decision. We can decide that we want to postpone it and then wait till other processes take place. But I don't see what upside there is for us doing that. And I think that there are more compelling reasons that we should just allow something that obviously, I believe that ComWest in particular, as a sophisticated development entity, has done its due diligence and has discovered, relative to the business model that they work on, that there is an allowance to have this concurrency. So I don't know why we would want to hold them up in particular. So I'm not going to be supporting this. I hope that they can go ahead and get the fundamental finding that they need sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
I believe that, certainly as indicated earlier, that ALC makes the final decision on whether they can remove those properties out of the ALR without the other 2. That has nothing to do with us. But I do think that we should move along and proceed to not put up roadblocks along the way or to not slow it down, to allow them to move in a way that can move as quickly as possible. In the end, if the ALC decides that they're not going to allow them to go out as 6 on its own, then that'll be the decision. But in the meantime, why would we want to slow it down? We need industrial land, we need job creation, and so I think we should do what we can to keep the process moving. And so in this case, I will support first and second reading on this application.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Arneson, your hand is still up. Are you complete? And
Sorry,
Councillor Woodward.
I'm done.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I thought there might have been some middle room here. I think as I, I'm kind of interested to see people changing their minds here. I mean, what was the point of the CPC discussion? So for me, I'm looking at it, nothing's changed for me. I am uncomfortable proceeding to rezone property that's still in the ALR. I think we have one property owner that's asking us to follow the process that is requested by the ALC. We received that letter very clearly today. It seems very reasonable to me that they would move together as a group. And if they're not able to do that, that the ALC needs to reconsider and come out with a new set of conditions that may be changing. Maybe the ALC will do something different if the 8 aren't going to move forward. We're presupposing what the ALC is going to do, that somehow they're coming out in any event, quote unquote. Well, I don't know that to be true. Of course, they obviously want that. But we have property owners A asking for one thing and property owner B asking for the other. So the property owner that's asking for the process to play out as already been revealed by the ALC seems to be the one that has the lesser burden. I don't know why we're telling that property owner that they matter less than the others. The ALC has said that they want them all to come out together. That's being reconsidered. Property owners, some property owners want different things, and we seem to be favoring one over another. I don't really know why we're doing that. Why wouldn't the ALC process conclude? And then when the ALC process concludes, then if it's urban land, if it's in the rural plan, then we would rezone. Why don't we rezone the entire ALR on the chance that it might come out? Let's do that. That'd be great. Let's rezone everything to industrial that's in the ALR, and if it happens to come out, then we don't have to deal with the proper process. I mean, I don't know why, you know, there's this expectation of people purchasing properties, as we discussed in length at CPC, purchasing property outside of the urban boundary, outside of the Gloucester Industrial Park neighborhood plan, not yet out of the ALC, not yet meeting all the conditions with various property owners. I don't know why we're presupposing that process. Other than, you know, because people made some business decisions and now they don't like our decisions. I mean, I don't know why we're, again, I'm going to say it again, favoring one set of property owners over another. When I think the condition, the request to let the ALC process play out seemed pretty reasonable to me, based upon other people that have their interests in property, that now we're prioritizing someone over someone else. So for me, maybe there was a middle ground here. There was a possibility that this process wasn't, you know, the worst case scenario is of course being painted. You know, that certainly could be the case. It could take a long, long time. I'm not sure how long it's going to take. They also said it might be a matter of not that long. Why don't we kick this to the fall even, and let those conversations play out with staff. And if we get some more clarity on what's going on, and look at this again in the fall. And if the ALC is, you know, there's more clarity from staff here at the township, not from a private property advocate, but from township staff who've talked to the ALC staff, maybe we can look at what that process is actually going to look like, reported to us by our staff. And if it's coming back that it's going to look like a long time, then great, let's look at it again. But I don't understand this process for favoring one property owner over another, trying to adjudicate this fairly. Why would we be rezoning property that's not yet out of the LR? Thanks.
Councilor Richter?
Yeah, I have a question for staff. I want to understand this. So if we proceed with first and second, are we proceeding to take 6 out or 8 out? And if it goes through the rezoning process, is at the end of that process, is it 6 lots or is it 8 lots? And when it goes to Metro Vancouver, which is what it's going to have to do at some point, is it 6 lots it's going to Metro Vancouver or 8 lots?
Mr. Safi?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the question. Your Worship, as I believe it was stated at the last council meeting the committee meeting, the ALC process is really independent from ours. Whether the applicant or somebody makes an application for reconsideration, whether that decision is in support of the request or not, doesn't really affect how we do what we do. So those 2 separate processes being set aside, as far as the township's process is concerned, the applicant has made application for 1, community plan amendment, which is needed, and 2, rezoning, which is also needed if they wish to proceed with a development of some kind. Remember, the designation change, the OCP amendment, is simply a designation change. It does not in itself result in any development.
Okay, but is it 6 lots or 8 lots? I'm not understanding. Is it 6 or 8?
I'm getting to that, Your Worship. The rezoning process, I wanted to explain that before I go to the 6 or 8. The rezoning process is for 8. So I apologize. The OCP amendment is for 8. The rezoning is for 6. OCP amendments do not need specific approval as long as council initiates them. Rezoning does. The designation can change subject to council direction. So I wanted to set the stage before I respond to the specific question of 6 or 8. There are both 6 and 8 in play. 8 with respect to the OCP, 6 with respect to the rezoning.
Okay, so why is the OCP coming forward removing 8 when we've only got an application in front of us for 6?
Your worship, the process, as I said, is not for removal, it's for designation and rezoning. And the rezoning will not happen until such time as the Land Commission has excluded. So these are just the first 2 readings. It will then proceed subject to council's approval to public hearing, and subsequently it will sit at 3rd reading if council wishes to grant 3rd reading until such time as the decision by the Land Commission has been made. So there is no removal per se until such time as the decision has been made by Land Commission. As far as the rezoning is concerned, that is for 6 and the OCP amendment for 8. To change the zoning to something else requires a designation to be changed, hence the need for the OCP amendment to change the designation.
Okay, so if we're proceeding with an OCP amendment of 8 and that passes, then the owner of the 2 properties that, like I think Councillor Woodward referred to it as property owner B, who's got rural properties, he's then going to start paying industrial level property taxes on that. Is that correct?
Your worship, I am not an expert in how taxes are levied. We'll have to defer that question to, or refer it, I should say, to maybe somebody from finance if they're aware, or maybe the BC assessment folks. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
Rob.
I would like to know if the rezoning is done and there's one property owner that's not participating in it, and and the OCP amendment goes through, does that mean that his property taxes are going to go from rural, agricultural, up to light industrial or whatever it is in Gloucester?
I think, I don't know, Ms. Ruff could answer that. I believe it would be based on your zoning. However, it's also that double whammy of the assessed value based on the zoning. So if it's industrial, if it's zoned industrial, that'd be tax industrial. If it's zoned rural, it'd be tax rural, but it'd be tax rural on whatever the assessed value is based on property sales. But I'm not sure if the the assessment looks at they sometimes look at these differently, and they have a different rules. So I don't know if Ms. Ruff or anybody else that can help answer
I'll
that.
start off, and Ms. Ruff can perhaps assist, because it is a bit of a tricky one. Yes, the BC Assessment Authority does take into account the overall OCP or neighborhood plan designation, even if the zoning's not in place. However, the final value lift does really come from the zoning being in place. So it's really a matter of a continuum, whereas if it's rural, it has a value of X. If it's a rural property zoned rural but has an OCP designation of something greater, either at the OCP or neighborhood plan level, it becomes a Y. And if it actually has got an OCP designation and as well a neighborhood plan, if that was applicable, and the zoning, then it would become Z. So it's a bit of a progression. Ms. Ruff, is that your understanding of how assessment works as well?
I actually can't comment on those details.
Okay, well, I still think that there's a fairness and an equity issue here. If a landowner is not participating for whatever reason, if he gets stuck with a tax bill that goes up, I don't know, at least 100-fold, if not more, is that fair? And I still don't understand why we cannot wait for the rezoning or for the Agricultural Land Commission to make its final determination. I don't understand why these guys are jumping the gun, trying to get out the date or trying to get out the door. Now, the final question that I have pertains to public input, because right now we still have in place a policy around COVID rules, and I am concerned that there will not be a full and proper public hearing on this matter. Can staff assure me that that is not going to be the case, that that there will be a full and proper public hearing on this rezoning?
Mr. Seffi?
Your worship, I guess I will request some clarification as to the intent of a full and proper. There will be a need for a public hearing. At this point, though, I will look to the clerk to confirm we are allowing, I guess, written submissions in lieu of an in-person meeting.
Written submissions isn't going to cut it for something of this magnitude, in my
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great, but let Mrs. Seppi finish. I think you want to get the clerk to provide some further input.
Your Worship, so that's why I wanted to get some clarification from Councillor Victor as to what the intent would have been with respect to a full and proper. If in fact the need is for an in-person meeting, it will have to be a direction from council, because otherwise the regular public hearing does allow for virtual meetings and written submissions.
Okay, so people can show up at a Zoom meeting if an in-person meeting is still out of the question.
At this point, that's my understanding. Perhaps Ms. Bauer can clarify, Your Worship.
If I can provide further information, as this is an OCP amendment, we are required to have a public hearing. At this time, it would still be a public hearing that was virtual, as we're not able to have individuals come into the civic facility. Once we reach level 4, we would be able to have gatherings again. But as with any of the public health orders, we have to wait until we get to that point.
Okay, and is there anything prohibiting council from requiring or from deferring the public hearing to a time when people can show up in person? Is there anything that would prohibit that?
Ms. Bauer or Mr. Bracken?
I would say, as per the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, no. But that is as far as I could comment on it.
Mr. Bracken?
Your Worship, it may come down to a situation of timing. And again, it's hard to predict that timing because, of course, what we seek is equity in treating all applications the same. So I think if that is where we get to, we can revisit that in more detail, because we want to ensure that whether the process be for a development permit, for a rezoning, or an OCP, we have consistency in our processes. And that would be the question we'd have to spend a bit more time on.
Okay, I guess where I'm coming from around this is, if the ALR, through its reconsideration, says that yes, these 8 lots can be removed from the ALR, that still doesn't obligate us to make them industrial land without proper consultation with the public. And what I'm concerned about, and I'm seeing a bit of a trend here of applications being pushed through because of COVID restrictions, and they are going to be having an impact on the surrounding rural character of the area. So no public information meetings, for example, or just written submissions only. And you don't even have to have a public hearing if it's not, if it's the underlining zoning and the OCP is there. So I'm thinking that this is one that requires public submission, and I want to make sure that it would appear to me that council's going to push this forward. And if they are going to push it forward, that we're going to allow for proper public consultation.
Thank you. And if I could comment, actually, if you're done, put my initials on the list here. We're not doing first and second reading tonight. It's just this motion, so it would come back at a future council meeting for first and second reading, and then if council wished to do anything at that point, that would be appropriate as far as public hearings, input, and that kind of thing. As far as this, I just have a question for staff. The rezoning wouldn't come to fourth reading until all conditions of the ALC were met. Is that correct, Mr. Seppi?
That is correct, Your Worship. The staff cannot, in fact, the Township of Langley Council cannot grant final reading to a piece of property that remains in the ALR, Your Worship. So a condition of approval, a condition of final reading would be ALC's approval of the exclusion.
And it would also require Metro Vancouver approval of change to the OCP. Is that correct, or regional contact statement?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so we're not rezoning this. There are things that have to happen. We're approving it to go through the process, but rezoning comes at fourth reading, and unless all of these boxes are ticked, it won't even come to fourth reading. And then if it did come to fourth reading, we would have that oversight to ensure that those boxes were ticked. My vote won't change. I didn't vote for this. I'm confident that I'm still voting consistent with how I voted before. I kind of agree with Councillor Arneson, and I'm not favoring one over the other. I see one application in front of us, and certainly we do consider input from neighboring properties, and that's all I see is there's a neighboring property that has some input. I'm not pinning one against the other. I think I'm not favoring one against the other. I think it's I'm focusing on this one particular application. Another application comes, I look at it based on its merits. I would like it eventually, when it does come, I would like it to go to first and second reading, hear from the public, and have that public hearing, and get all of that information in a more official manner. But right now, I'm not going to support this, consistent with my last vote. Thank you. And move on to the second speaker, Councillor Long.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So you're voting against the motion, and I'm going to do the same. I think I already spoke to that, but I just wanted to point out that a lot of the comments then in this last discussion that we've had put away some of these concepts that we're rezoning property that's still in the ALR because we can't, and that we're proceeding to first and second, which we're not. And this whole point, now there was a call that I was on your behalf, Your Worship, with Minister Osborne, talking about the need for councils to return to in-person meetings. There will always be the ability to attend a public hearing or a council meeting online, should you choose to, but we are going to be returning back probably in step 4, which is scheduled at this moment for September the 7th, I understand. So we have 2 other motions pertaining to this application that talk about other processes that we would like to embark upon, and I'm going to be supportive of those, which would mean that there isn't going to be a first and second reading for a little while. And and I'm happy to talk about the comments from Councillor Woodward that the middle ground would be to allow a little bit of time for these things to happen and things to develop. So I think it automatically does, if I'm not mistaken, and perhaps Your Worship, through you to staff, they could comment that if we just allow it to go and we pass the other 2 motions, so if this one gets defeated and the other 2 pass, there's going to have to be some negotiation from staff, which is going to take some time. And the proponent said so in the delegation, that when there was a suggestion of revisiting it in the fall, that it would likely be the fall before it came back. So we've only got a few weeks now, or a few meetings until the summer break, so it's not likely to come back. So I'd just like to have staff maybe assure us when would be most likely a public hearing. Well, first of all, when most likely would it come back for first and second? And if so, would not the timing therefore suggest sometime in September, which would allow what Councillor Richter is looking for, which is, and I think we all are, in-person gatherings and allowing the public to come out and speak. So that would be certainly after September, I would think, before any public hearing would be scheduled on this. So is that, could we have staff confirm that? Or
Mr. Sefi?
Your Worship, I will try, but look to Mr. Backen or Ms. Bauer to provide additional clarification or comments. Subject to Council's direction, Your Worship, this could come back for Council's consideration of first and second reading, at which time Council could provide staff with additional conditions to impose, including an in-person public hearing, including additional discussions with the proponent to ensure that there's adequate amenity contributions provided prior to consideration of third reading, or Council could, I guess, hold back on those additional conditions until such time as the in-person public hearing has been held. So Council's got quite a bit of flexibility and discretion as to how they wish to direct staff to proceed. But I think, barring any additional comments today, I would have imagined, and again, I look to Ms. Bauer for this application to be brought back for Council's consideration of first and second reading, unless contrary directions provided.
So, Your Worship, just to finish that, so it sounds to me like there is going to be a pause in this process, especially when we talk about the other 2 motions. So I think it's very safe, in my opinion, hearing these comments, that we don't support this, because the only thing that could become an issue, from what I've heard today, is if we pass this motion, if we condition all our decisions upon the ALC, when we have no crystal ball, we don't know what's going to be involved with that or what other events could occur that could harm this application. So I think voting this down is the wisest thing to do. We're going to discuss the other two motions. There's going to be some work to be done. Next thing you know, it's a summer break. Next thing you know, we're in September where in-person meetings can occur. And of course, this being an OCP amendment must have a public hearing, so there's no doubt about that. So I'm going to go with you, Your Worship, and vote against this, knowing that those other processes are going to occur, which is going to make things much better for me to make the final decisions when they come.
Mr. Backen, do you have some comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's just all as to the timing. I think most of the comments are in accordance with our understanding. But if we looked at the specific timing, and Ms. Bauer will have to help me with this, I think that we would be looking at bringing this back at the next meeting of council, if this is defeated, which would be in July. That would leave one additional meeting in July. The timing of that is interesting because I'm not sure of the interval between those as to whether or not it would make that public hearing on that date. We would have to consider that. But we have one thing to be aware of, and Ms. Bauer, this is where I need your help in terms of the public hearing. You often cautioned me in terms of the change back to the traditional public hearing process. I think there's some steps we have to undertake. And the reason I say that is, again, it's this issue of equity through all of the applications. As we've seen, there's some consternation and concern when all of the applications are not treated the same way. And there's often very good reasons for that. It's not to question that, but it's more of the duty and responsibility to proceed with these matters in an equitable fashion. And I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but Ms. Bauer, then suffice it to say then, when we come back in September, then will those automatically be the traditional public hearings, or is there some work we must do in between?
At this time, with this application, because there is no CP amendment, it will require a public hearing. If we choose to not amend the procedure bylaw to include electronic public hearings as part of it, we would return to the existing public hearing structure we have, which would be written submissions and individuals coming to council and speaking. As this application does not include, or does include an OCP, that would be the role of it. If it did not include an OCP, we need to further examine the development application procedure bylaw and determine what our way forward is.
Your Worship, allow me to continue. So this is because when the PHO order is lifted.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Long has already spoken twice to the motion.
I'm still speaking.
Oh, he still has the floor. I haven't moved on to Councillor Ferguson yet. So Councillor Long, go ahead.
I don't know why you're shaking it.
No, go ahead, Councillor Long.
Feel a little bit here. Yeah, so this is complicated because we talked about procedural fairness for everybody, and this is a big theme on this council meeting. We've got all kinds of applications being treated differently. Anyway, so that I think you all know that. So here we're talking about the lifting of the provincial health order. When that's lifted, then we no longer can say, hey, COVID, we can't have any meetings. So, and I do repeat, Your Worship, and we should talk about this at the meeting with the Minister Osborne recently. The provincial government is going to urge us to go back, but have the opportunity to do both, which is going to be very flexible. But the fact is that there are subsequent motions coming up any minute now, which require staff to, if they're passed, for staff to negotiate with the proponents. So that's going to, why would we come back with first and second reading at the next meeting? So I'd like clarification from Mr. Bakken. That would only be if we don't pass the other motions, because if we ask staff to go back and negotiate with the proponent, which is one of the motions we're going to talk about, then it wouldn't be coming back at the next meeting, would it?
I can say that it could come back, but we could put conditions on it. But right now we can't put conditions on. We can have this, but there's no conditions. Mr. Bakken?
You're correct, Your Worship. It is about the fact we can add conditions to it. And those conditions can then be really subject to final adoption. That meaning that the conditions must be met prior to final adoption. There's one very important point, though, that Councillor Long referenced. I think we really have to pause for a moment. And that is, once the public health order is lifted, do we automatically go back to the old way? And my understanding is, I think we have to go through a bylaw process to go back to the old way, because we had to go through a bylaw process to get to the new way. Ms. Bauer, you're the one that most frequently cautions me on this. Am I on the right understanding here, or is there have I got it backwards?
Mr. Bakken is correct. At this time, anything requiring OCP amendment does still get a public hearing. We made a decision at the beginning of the pandemic, in order to limit the amount of people coming into the civic facility, that those items that were simply rezonings and did not include an OCP amendment, the public hearing will be waived and replaced by a written submission opportunity. So at such time as the public health orders are lifted, we need to re-examine how we want to manage the public hearings and go back and amend or continue with the current development application procedure bylaw.
Okay, really interesting, Your Worship. So maybe at the end of the meeting, I can put a notice of motion because we're going to have to talk about that sometime pretty soon. But
Yeah.
I guess open it up according to council.
Thanks. Yeah, just further on that, legislatively, they'll make change. The province has stated to the mayors on a mayor's call that they'll be making changes to the community charter to allow for procedural bylaws to adapt once they remove the state of emergency, and then basically all of these way we're doing the work falls off. We have to then update our procedural bylaws. So that is what's happening in the work just as you mentioned. So that's coming down the road.
Yeah, finally,
that is coming.
I was in that meeting last week, and she's urging municipalities.
Yeah, I know. But they have to change the legislation also. Yeah. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, an interesting debate. I think Councillor Woodward had some suggestions about, how we might be able to deal with this in the way of call it a cooling off period or a timeline or a compromise. It's interesting that this motion came out of the CPC, and it's interesting to note that there's an awful time, energy, and effort to get to this motion, and it almost seems as if we've gone backward on that meeting, and we have a lot of things to discuss. Perhaps this item should not have been, if it was that easy to, as I've been, I guess, it indicated to me earlier on that we already had an answer, so why have a meeting? So that's kind of odd because this motion was on the agenda, so I'm surprised. Okay, so my question to staff, if I may, Mr. Backen, are we not Langley Township still not a regulated community by the Land Commission or the province?
Your Worship, that is correct. I think where you're headed is the fact that until the property comes out of the ALR, any zoning bylaws would require ministerial approval. That would be between third and final, effectively. So it would be a condition to final adoption. So we still.
So Mr. Beckett, if I was sitting in the Land Commission or a member of the provincial legislature or cabinet, I would be saying, well, what is the Township of Langley doing? Did they not provide us with information on a number of policy requirements and steps in which they wanted regarding this application, if I may, through the chair?
Your Worship, again, it's a difficult question to answer when posed that way. The challenge is the bylaw could not get final adoption unless the ministerial order was in place if it's in the ALR. If the ALR decides to remove the land from the agricultural land reserve, at that point, the minister no longer has jurisdiction. At that point, then we proceed to our normal rezoning process. So in short, it really depends upon the timing of each of the steps you're referencing.
And Mr. Backen, if I may, I would think, and I could be wrong, when this application, which is on me looked at by the Land Commission and ruled upon or given some kind of direction, I'm not sure what the bureaucrats call it, and we have been provided that, and it says, as other members of council have indicated, it's 8 lots, not 6. Now they're looking to look at it again. I would think that other party will be at that table. And they may or may not, because I've been educated by some of my colleagues today about the fact that our wisdom versus the wisdom of the ALR, and is they may be saying, well, what the heck's the Township of Langley doing again? What is the Township of Langley doing again? And I know that we have a number of councillors here that are fairly new to the process, but we have been looked upon unfavorably by a number of things regarding Land Commission decisions. And I think if we need to patch things up with the Land Commission and not be put up in a situation where we're making decisions and not listening to the recommendations that they are. I don't think they'll be successful with the 6. That's my own personal opinion, and that's my research that I've done. So maybe there's a compromise on time. I am not against jobs. I'm not against industrial land. We've never said that. All I'm saying is that we should follow some policy, some direction that's being put in front of us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna share some of that frustration with Councillor Ferguson, some of his initial comments. I don't know why we have these CPC meetings at all. If three of us are changing our minds here, I mean, what is the point of these CPC meetings and the 2 hours and the day set aside to make these motions to just have the same debate a second time? That's a procedural issue probably for a couple of years from now. The other thing here, though, is I wanted to ask about is, you know, this idea that we're not pitting property owners against each other. I think that's a bit dramatic. I don't think we're pitting them against each other. What I'm trying to do is follow the ALC's original recommendations and process outlined in their decision, that all 8 had to be done together. And so we get a request from the other property owner, word for word. It's my opinion the correct decision is to deal with the 8 properties together, as the ALC has consistently done throughout these properties' history. It'd be premature for the application to the Township of Langley to proceed until a decision has been made by the ALC. That seems perfectly reasonable to me, and I haven't heard a single suggestion other than inconvenience and delay to overturn or do something different from the ALC. I understand people don't like delays from local government. You don't have to tell me about delays from local government. But the issue is going to be that is the situation. You're speculating on farmland, you get it out of the ALR, and why wouldn't it come out of the ALR before we rezone it? Why don't we go and rezone all kinds of properties that we want to come out of the ALR? So, hey, great, the minute they're out there, they got their zoning. I mean, that to me is we are choosing one property over another in contradiction to what the ALC has suggested. They've asked for reconsideration of that, as we discussed at the CPC meeting, and I don't understand why we're not following through with that. And if it turns out that that is going to take a very, very long period of time, and other items subject on the application are worked out, then we can come back and look at that timing again. The idea that somehow we're rushing to first and second and potentially a written submission opportunity, I'm sorry, I wouldn't want to call it a public hearing. We don't do those anymore. Rush towards this written submission opportunity here before the summer break, I think is a pretty big slap in the face to the other property owners. And I think it's a pretty big slap in the face to the regular, reasonable process, as the ALC has suggested we follow. And I think we should follow that process. And I think all 8 properties should be dealt with together, as this council decided to do at the CPC meeting.
Thank you. All right. I thought we could get to vote before 4:30, but it looks like we can't. I still have 3 speakers, and we did have a hard stop at 4:30. So I will ask if those next speakers, if they really have something new to add, but I don't want to take away their time. We could then just adjourn and come back, and I have Councillor Richter, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Davis is next, but we did have a hard stop at 4:30. So,
okay, Mr. Mayor, as a question of clarification, if we adjourn now to move into in camera, can we finish the special closed session before we come back to the regular meeting?
If that's the wish of council, we certainly could work through that. So what I do then, I've kept the list.
So I would move we adjourn this meeting to after the special closed meeting has been completed.
Okay, barring we do have a public hearing at 7, so yeah, that sounds good. Miss Bauer, does that make sense?
That would be fine, but I would request that motion Q gets passed to go into closed before we pass the adjournment.
Yes. Could we have a motion also, Councillor Richter, just to pass the motion Q? So I have Councillor Richter, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Davis next. So if you just move
okay, I just have one quick question. My question is, if we give first and second on July 12th, is the intent to hold the public hearing on July 26th? Or can that public hearing be postponed until the fall?
Ms. Bauer?
That would be up to council's direction.
Okay.
So I would have to put a motion on to hold the public hearing in the fall?
That can be done, yes, at the time.
Okay, where would I do that, Mr. Mayor? Would I do it
at first and second reading?
At first and second, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Whitmarsh and Davis, do you have something quick, or can we, because we could conclude this.
I'm 30 seconds, I'm ready to vote. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, and I'd like to let the ALC do its thing.
Okay.
And I'm ready to vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
I'm good, thanks.
Are you done? Okay. Okay, we got to a point now we can call the question. On K3, all those in favor and opposed? So I have Councillor Richter opposed.
No, I'm not
No,
opposed.
you're in favor, I believe. Councillor
Favor,
Richter. Yeah, okay. So we'll start again. Mayor froze. Councillor Arneson's opposed. Councillor Long is opposed. Councillor Whitmarsh opposed. And so the motion carries.
Oh.
Who else? Sorry. Councillor Kuntz, I did. Okay. Okay. So now we need a motion to adjourn.
I will move adjournment till after the special close and if
I'm
necessary.
sorry,
public
excuse me, I'm sorry. We still need the motion Q passed, please. Prior to adjournment.
We've completed the motion now. It was
No.
carried.
Q is to go into special closed.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We'll move special close.
Okay, with approving the Q. So Councillor Richter already moved it. So Councillor Ferguson seconds it. All those in favor, opposed, carried. So we'll adjourn. Take a couple of minutes to switch over and maybe come back quickly. I'll take a quick stretch.